Good evening. Fall River Community Media is pleased to sponsor tonight's forum featuring the candidates running for City Council. My name is Keith Tebow, Director of FRC Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator for tonight's forums. We're holding 2 City Council forums tonight. The second forum will be held later this evening beginning at 8 p.m. All candidates were invited to participate, and the makeup of our 2 panels was determined via a drawing. The candidates who are with us for our first panel are, alphabetically, Joseph Camara, Michelle Dion, Matthew Springer, and Ricky Tith. We did hear from 3 other candidates tonight who regretfully are not here tonight. Sean Kadim, current city councilor, had called us saying that he had a work commitment tonight and could not be here. Also tonight, City Councilor Brad Kilby called us. Unfortunately, his father was rushed to the hospital a few days ago, so we wish him and his family all the best with that situation. And City Councilor Leo Pelletier also called us saying that he is under the weather and unable to join us tonight. And also joining us tonight is Mark Malacombe. Mark, thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Thank you. Also joining us tonight is a panel of journalists who will be asking questions of the candidates. They are Mike Sylvia from the Fall River Reporter, Phil Devitt from the Herald News, Pam Martin from FRG TV, Alan Zarek from WSAR Radio, and Don Amata from FRC Media. The format for tonight's debate is as follows. Our event will last 90 minutes. There will be no opening statements, but each candidate will be allowed a 90-second closing statement. Each candidate will answer every question posed by our panelists, and will have 90 seconds to answer each question. There will be no rebuttals. Prior to each question, we will randomly draw a candidate's name, and that candidate will respond to the question first. So after that person answers the question, we'll move to the right and around until every candidate has an opportunity to answer the question. In the event, and probably likely tonight, that all of you will be able to answer a question first, we'll put the names back into the cup and we'll draw again to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to answer a question first. We'll also hold a drawing as well to select which candidate will present his or her closing statement first later on. With that said, we are ready to go. We'll get right to our questions. Our first question will be asked by Michael Sylvia from the Fall River Reporter and will be answered by Michelle Dion first. Michael.
Good evening. So for the incumbents, which is one tonight, since you've been elected to the City Council, what accomplishments are you most proud of? And for the non-incumbents, if you're elected, what would be your #1 priority going into 2020 that 2 years later you would be able to say is your most greatest accomplishments?
As a newcomer, I would like to be able to be inclusive, get our city on a more positive track, move towards sustainability, stability, put our city back on the map in a positive light, move forward with our assets, showing what Fall River has for assets, as we have many. We need an emphasis on community, bringing the community together, helping our youth, helping our elders, still battling the opioid crisis. Education still needs to be paramount. And I believe that when I'm elected, I will be able to do that. We need to work together. We need to be a team, not go in opposite directions. I believe that though people have different views and can be on opposite sides, that is a positive thing, because that's how you come up with solutions, by having a robust conversation, robust ideas to lead to solutions for our city.
Thank you. Mr. Malacombe.
So education would be the #1 priority for myself. I believe that in order for the city to have economic development, redevelopment, or to have tourism or businesses come here, we need to put education at the forefront. I personally would try to work with Senator Rodericks and hopefully with the help of Governor Baker, we could get the Promise and Cherish Act passed so that $1.5 billion comes back to the urban schools in our Commonwealth. I believe that Michelle touched on some things that I would like to also state, that even though we have diverse opinions and we come from diverse backgrounds, whether you're an incumbent or a newcomer, you have to be able to work with each other. My background is being a professional quarterback, a leader in the business community. I've owned my own businesses. I've been a manager of other people's business, both in construction and sales. And I think that without everybody working together, you're going to be divided, and a kingdom divided is a kingdom conquered. So that being said, I know that two people working together can get twice as much done as one person working twice as hard. And I would consider it an honor to be a part of the city council, work with anyone that's voted in there, as well as the new mayor, to achieve some of these things. We do have a problem with the opioid crisis. That's something that we need education about, on both sides, both for the addicted as well as folks in the community that own their own business.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Springer.
So hands down, biggest thing for me is bringing back a positive image back to the city. We all deserve it. We live in an amazing city. We have a great culture, a lot of things going on here. Unfortunately, in the past 6 months that have gone, we've had this black cloud that has kind of plagued us and given us unfortunate negative attention in the media for things that shouldn't be said about Fall River. So my goal is bringing back that positive image, promoting our restaurants, our waterfronts, bringing back those things that Fall River was known for back when Fall River had mills and textiles and great things, and people actually wanted to come here from out of town. It seems to me a lot of people come here, get an education here, then they kind of branch off to different places in the community. So the big goal is education in Fall River, work here, live here, spend your money here. If we spend our money here, our economy gets bigger and better, and everybody is going to thrive on a better economy and people staying here. Thank you.
Mr. Tith.
Well, as the voice of the people, I would like to bring City Hall back to the people, and also we'll focus on economic development. I know our city is great for the mills and stuff, but we need more technologies in. So I'm planning to have more training to get ready to do like surface mount PC boards and solder and stuff. And also, I will also try to push with public safety because as we know that there's have been so many incidents in this couple months in our city. So definitely I will help push public safety and economic development.
Thank you. Mr. Camara.
So it's a great question, and I've been very fortunate. And if you like what all of the candidates have said, and I agree with like what all they've said, you have to love what I've been doing, because education is paramount to what we need to do in this community. And I was very fortunate to be one of the lead individuals in building 10 new schools and now being part of building a new Durfee High School. We must continue to address and fix our education system. Public safety, the first resolution I ever filed was a resolution that relined all the water mains in the city of Fall River. And it's been going on over 20 years. We've done nearly 70 miles of water main replacement, and another 40 miles will be complete. Every new water main in this city will be new. That's something that's never been heard of, never been done before. That's something I'm very proud of. It's a resolution that I filed myself. As far as creating jobs for the city, I'm very proud to be a member of the council that has created not one industrial park with Commerce Park, but two with the Biopark. I also had to take land by eminent domain years ago to help create Meditech to come in that facility. So it's all about finding the areas that we can bring new jobs to our community so people can work here, live here, and raise a family here. Public safety, I'm very proud of my record on public safety, where we've given all new fire apparatus, police cruisers, replenished all the departments, everything that they need to do their job. We have to keep giving them new equipment and new testing and new, everything they need, from fire apparatus to all the stuff that they need to do their job. Development of our waterfront is key and instrumental, and that's what we're working on now, and I'm very proud of my record as a city councilor in doing all of these things that will make Fall River a great place to live.
Thank you. Our next question will be asked by Phil Devitt from the Herald News, and will be answered first by Joseph Camara.
The mayor is currently the only local official who signs off on letters of non-opposition and host community agreements for a marijuana company seeking to set up shop here in the city. State Rep Carol Fiola has filed a bill that would require those companies to seek approval from a majority of locally elected officials in Massachusetts communities. In Fall River's case, that would be the City Council. Would you support this measure, and how much oversight do you think the council should have in the approval process?
Well, thank you. Yes, I would support this measure. I think the state now is finding that they made a mistake when they gave sole authority to one individual to sign off on these licenses, not just because of what happened in Fall River. Fall River might have been a big part of it, but other communities were doing the same type of thing. Other communities were asking these people who wanted a letter of non-opposition to buy fire apparatus, to buy police cruisers, to fix up streets in their neighborhoods, do infrastructure repairs, and that's not fair to people that are going into that industry. We don't ask that of anyone else who's looking to start a business or bring a company to Fall River or any other community. So the state dropped the ball, and I understand that this is all new to us. It's new to the state, it's new to the communities. No one really knows how to go about it. I think what we should have probably done is put restrictions in place, like we did with the strip clubs, to make sure that they're not near the schools, they're not near the residential places, as we have right now with a lot of congestion over there, and make it safe for everybody to be able to get in, get out, and do what they need to do. But the state has to put more guidelines in place and regulations so that the sole authority does not fall on the one individual in any community, and it should be within the city council or selectmen or either other department heads brought together, have a board that will address where these are going to go and how they're going to be placed and how many you're going to have in the community. Right now, we don't have any of that. It's unfortunate.
Ms. Dion.
I also fully agree with that measure. I think part of the problem was we're on the forefront of the cannabis industry. And like anything else, we learn through sometimes trial and error and unforeseen problems. And no one could anticipate how things were going to roll out, how things were going to end up. We do have some businesses that perhaps are in jeopardy. Until everything follows its course, we won't know whether all 14 people should maintain their approvals or they shouldn't. And that, that's just some of the problems. I believe that the number one thing we need to do is zoning. I think zoning is very important. That was not addressed prior to people getting their letters of non-opposition, and it was not specifically determined where people could set up, where they can't. Because we're also going to be looking at cultivation and manufacturing. That's going to add another, I believe, another layer to the problems, and that's why I think zoning is important. With that said, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here. Brother.
Just wrap it up.
Just wrap it up. So yes, I think we obviously have things to learn. We can do it better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Malcolm.
Thank you. I do believe that with true leadership, the situation that was beforehand with the mayor deciding letters of non-opposition could have worked. However, hindsight being 20/20, possibly a board could be appointed independently. I don't know exactly how that we would go about that. I did not have the pleasure of reading Carol Fiola's legislative proposal. However, I would love to read that and truly understand in order to answer this more accurately. But with true leadership, I think anyone could have made really great decisions for our city, putting our citizens first, and realizing that one of the first and actually most busy marijuana facility, I believe it's off of Commonwealth Street. There's sort of an overrun of traffic there. The folks that live there sometimes have a hard time, and I've found out through folks that do live there, have a hard time just getting home at the end of the day, which I think is terribly wrong, considering when you're done with work, you just want to get home, get to your family, have dinner, and spend time with your loved ones. So I think we need to definitely, like Michelle said, take a look at some of the issues of where they can set up shop, how they set up shop, and that we could have an independent board appointed, and how that would be done, I think remains to be seen.
Thank you. Mr. Springer.
Okay, yeah, so I'm going to definitely 100% agree on not one person having the power to hand out these letters. We kind of saw how that played out in the past few months. So having the city council have at least a 50% say in who's getting these letters, where they're going, putting the checks and balance in places to make sure they're not, near a school or near some sort of educational facility where children are seeing this. The other thing is, I want to touch on Mr. Malcolm's thing is, that facility he's talking about, I happen to work about a stone's throw away from there. I drive by it every single day. Traffic, is it a problem? Absolutely. Why is it a problem? There's only one selling recreational marijuana. So everybody from all over creation comes there. Supply and demand is economics 101. If there's more, people will get dispersed, just like a liquor store. Only one person sold it, they'd all be there. So with that being said, I think the thing that comes up a lot is capping them. I don't think capping them is a good idea. It's kind of like we don't cap other industries. Let the market kind of dictate how those things play out, and every single one of them is going to give the city money. Whatever ones survive, survive. Whatever ones don't.
Thank you. Mr. Tith.
Well, I think in the past, all our city official, we make a decision only by individual or by a group of people. But for me, I would like to, moving forward, like just, get in whatever that is we have come into the city. If you view it by together as a city official, either city council or the mayor office. But I don't think that we should cap the permit license for it, because that's the revenue that is coming into our city right now. And we should do, every time we have a business coming in, we should look into the bone zone to see if there's a school or if there's traffic high, because as we right now, there's a lot of high traffic in the parking space and stuff. So I'm not opposed on that.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Pam Martin, and will be answered first by Mark Mollicone.
Okay, so we've had this discussion before here in Fall River. How important is for you to have city employees who live here in Fall River? And do you favor stipends for city employers who do indeed live here in the city of Fall River?
So I think that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I've had the privilege of visiting several city stations, such as DCM. I've talked with them at great length. Police officers as well, firefighters. I've gotten to know them fairly well over the years, and especially here lately. And I think that there should be stipends for city workers, and I do believe that they should, for some time, live in our city. If they're going to make our city safer, if they're going to work to put out fires in our city, if they're going to be a part of our community, they should be taken care of. I was always taught that charity starts at home. And I feel that if you're invested in a community that you live in, you're more apt to take care of it. And I truly do believe we have a great police force, great first responders in our EMTs, our firefighters. I'm very impressed with them, their level of education and how they handle things. And I would love to see them be more a part of our city, as well as myself. I was born and raised here. I believe in this city. I had an opportunity to live in multiple other places, and I chose here. This was my choice to come back to my city that I was born and raised in. So, yeah, I would love to see our city employees, as well as others, come back to our city, help support it, and make it great once again. Thank you.
Mr. Springer.
Great question. So I'm lucky enough to be friendly with several firefighters and policemen on the fire department and the police department. And some do live here, started living here, and have moved on to other communities. Why does that happen? Is it because of what's going on here in the city, how they're, I don't know what's not keeping those certain city employees here. They started here, originally worked here, and then moved on. So should priority be given to citizens that work here to be on a police or fire or other city positions? Absolutely. I think if you live here, you work here, you're going to enjoy it here, you're going to spend your money here, you're going to own a home here, you're going to pay us taxes here. Hands down, people that live here should get priority on those certain things. Just like Mr. Malcolm said, I've been born and raised here my entire life, never left, own a home here, pay taxes here, so I'm very keen on those salaries going to people that are living here and investing their time back into our community. So I think that's a great question, and I think that's something that definitely should be looked at.
Mr. Tith.
Well, appreciation for hard working, why not? Because I know, I say a lot of people, like for example, fire departments, the guys I know, and also public work, Forest Service public work, I went to talk to them and stuff, it's, the city is not giving enough appreciation to them, and, they feel like they're working tirelessly, and then they don't show anything. If, for example, if you're working in industrial, if you want to get promoted, you get appreciation of that, but on your hard work, and maybe we could do an assessment and just giving a stipend to somebody that maybe you like or in favor. For example, if they say John Doe, if John Doe's working hard, give an assessment, put it on the Facebook or something, to see how it's that report back and then give it to him.
Thank you. Mr. Kamara.
Well, I was born and raised in the city, and I've never lived anywhere else, and I think it's a great place to live. But the problem, I think, is that I don't want to force people who don't want to live here because they work here. I think what we should do is make this city a place where people want to come to and live, and if they want to work here, that's fine too. But I think it's very tough to regulate when someone's working here, whether they're actually true living here or not living here. We've heard what's going on right now with certain individuals, so it's tough to regulate, number one. And if someone's living in a city and they happen to inherit a house in another community, whether it's Westport or something, what do? Turn that house, sell it, not be able to move there if they inherit that house? I think we should look at all the people in this city who live here, but yet work in other communities. So we live in a free country. I think we should live in a free city. People, we should make this city the best possible city to live in. I believe it is. That's why I live here. For where I live and what I have and what I can offer my family, I think this is the greatest place to live, work, and raise a family. I've said it before, I'll say it again. But I don't think we can be forcing people. If we're going to give you a job, you need to move to this community, you need to do this, because it's tough to regulate. Their heart's not really going to be into it. And eventually, you know what they're going to do? Find a job somewhere else in their community if that's what all the communities come to do. It just doesn't work, I don't think. I encourage people to live here, as I do. I work in the city. I'm very fortunate that I work in the city as well, and I raise my family here. But I think it's very difficult to try to regulate that and enforce it on people who are here. They'll find ways to go somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
Yes. I think that ideally, if we can have residents fill the positions that are available in the city, that is a great thing. However, I believe that there are, many circumstances, family situations. Sometimes people take care of elderly parents. I think there's legitimate reasons not to live in the city. I think it's important for elected officials, obviously, have to be residents of this city. I think specific positions, they should be city residents. But above and beyond that, you have to go along with, the housing market might dictate why somebody does or doesn't live in the city. And I agree with Councilor Kamara that, those type of reasons, I don't think that you can just pigeonhole people. As far as stipends, I don't agree with stipends. I believe that when you apply for a job, you know what you're applying for, what your requirements are, what the expectations are, how much money you're going to make. So when you agree to that, you're agreeing to that salary. And I don't believe that there's a reason to give somebody anything extra. There are people who always do above and beyond. Many people in private business that do above and beyond on a daily basis and don't get an extra cent. It's just their work ethic. So I am definitely against stipends.
Thank you. Our next question will be asked by Alan Zarek and will be answered first by Ricky Tith.
As a means to increase voter turnout, should Fall River have ballots available in Portuguese, Spanish, and other languages?
I think it's definitely moving forward, maybe in 2022 election, we could have more cultural language, and for example, this in Cambodian, in Portuguese, and Spanish, because I know it's like, for example, in the Cambodian community, there's a lot of people with a citizenship, but they don't know what, that voting on the ballot list. So definitely, we need to find ways to encourage more of the language barrier.
Thank you. Mr. Camara.
I mean, I speak Spanish and Portuguese fluently. I don't know, you have to be a U.S. citizen to be able to vote. If you want to offer those in different languages, I'm not sure it'll increase voter turnout. It might make it easier for some people to vote when they're at the ballot place. So it's basically a name and a title of position that they're voting for. So it's not a big, long explanation. I think the best way to increase voter turnout is to make more public aware announcements and educate children early on the importance of voting, the importance of participating in civic duties. And I can remember there was a teacher, I can't remember his name, but at Morton Middle School, every election, the school they would vote. Students in 7th and 8th grade would participate and have an in-school, in-classroom voting session. And then they'd look at the results and they'd see who won the election. I think we need to do more of that to let students and children know early on the importance of voting. And hopefully the parents will do it as well. I think it's a right and a privilege that sometimes we tend to take for granted, and more people have to be aware of when the voting date is. I don't think there's enough hype about when the election is coming up, who the candidates are, and that type of individuals, what they have to offer and what they don't. I think there's something, just to put ballots in foreign languages, I'm not sure it's just going to attract more people to turn out to vote. It might make it easier for some people, but I'm not necessarily going to increase voter turnout.
Ms. Dion?
We definitely do have a very diverse community, and I agree. Could it potentially help people? Might some people be a little more willing to come forward and vote because they feel they would have a better understanding? It's probably, I believe it's a good idea in terms of a tool, but I don't believe it would necessarily increase the number of people who come out to vote. I also agree that the younger the age that you instill the importance of voting, the more people will vote as adults, because voting is very important. Many people believe, oh, what's the point? Nothing's going to change. I can't change anything. But they don't realize that there are many people like them that have that same thought. And if you have, if one person can make a difference, there's people that have won by 7 votes in the past. So if those 7 people hadn't gone out to vote, that person wouldn't have won an election. So they don't realize how even a very small number really, truly does matter. And then, we often hear people after the fact. We hear the moaners and the groaners. Well, perhaps if they took a more active role and tried to affect change by voting, then they would be happier with the results after the fact, and they may have less to complain about.
Mr. Malcolm.
Thank you. I do believe that educating our youth and folks of an older age and using multilingual literature to help people make an informed and educated decision is important. I would say that education is the cornerstone and the great equalizer of everything in our society. So the more that the youth and other folks are educated and have those multilingual tools to be able to make an educated decision, the better I feel like our city would fare. In order for folks to feel included, they should be given the opportunity to receive either literature or a ballot in their native language, which they feel more comfortable. I too grew up in speaking multiple languages. My family on my father's side was Italian. I learned French and Spanish in school. I had friends that were Portuguese. I lived in Germany as well, and I tried to pick up as much of those languages as possible, but I always tried to adapt to their language or tried to at least understand what they were speaking about. And I just think that folks coming over here from other parts of the world, even other parts of the country that do speak different languages, they should be given the opportunity to vote and get literature in their native language to feel more comfortable. So
Thank you. Mr. Springer.
Okay, yeah, so do I think that having a ballot in a different language is going to necessarily increase voter turnout? No. Is it a good tool to maybe make that individual more comfortable when they go into the ballot, so they don't have to use a translator or they can actually read what's going on? Working in real estate and in the medical field, I understand language barriers and how they affect people every single day of my life. And are they challenges? Yes. I don't speak anything but English, So I do understand the difficulty of when you're trying to communicate a point to somebody and you can't get the right words out, how difficult that can be. They said education. I was absolutely amazed when I was going out just getting nomination signatures of people that were residents and said, hey, would you sign my nomination papers? Give them a reason why, and they say, oh, I'm not a registered voter. It was probably 1 out of 10. So I think really driving that point across, like they said, how elections sometimes have an incredibly narrow margin to educate people that going to vote isn't a big, long process. It probably takes 30 seconds if anybody's ever done it. So driving more people with education, how it's their civic duty, it's their only voice. We can talk about it all day, but where it makes that change is at the ballot box. And I think that's super, super important to drive that point across to the citizens that going to vote is where you're going to make the change.
Thank you. Our next question will be asked by Donna Mata from FRC Media and will be answered first by Matthew Springer.
If elected to the City Council, would you like to see the Fall River Office of Economic Development be brought back to work independently solely on economic development? Or do you feel that the current Economic Development Director is doing a good job in bringing businesses into the city? Which one would you rather see happen?
Great question. Economic development is obviously a huge thing that's going on in the city right now. It seems like every time we open up a different social media or the newspaper, something new is opening. So does that mean what's in place right now is working? Maybe. Is having a sole entity in charge of that going to bring more business or develop more housing or different things like that? I don't really have a good answer to that. I think things using like a lot of our developers just use the TIFs. They like to use CDA money, which is great for developing old structures instead of just knocking them down. So I think whatever's in place right now is working really well. We have tons of new businesses, young entrepreneurs, young people that want to come here, want to live here, want to open businesses here. And there's been more that have opened up in the past probably year that I can think of and longer than I can remember as far as economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tiff.
Well, I think the way our city right now is moving forward, and also economic is coming in, and also our new economic development. I think she's doing a very good job. And so why do we need to take something else and replace something new, then start all over again? So, and I think it's just only her. Short terms, and I think she should get more opportunity to grow more. And as a city council, we could help her finding areas and point it out. Work with her.
Thank you. Mr. Kamara?
Yeah, I've always been a strong supporter of economic development. In the past, I voted for every TIF that's ever come down, and just recently I voted for another one at the last council meeting, and even a tie for the residents. But I think that the economy is at an all-time low. The current director of economic development is under contract, so it's not as easy as just saying, let's, say goodbye. And I think we should give her an opportunity to do what she's doing. The economy is doing well. Unemployment's at an all-time low. There are a lot of projects that we haven't put in place right now. So what happened in the past, unfortunately, was done away with, and now we're going in a new direction, and I don't think that this is the time to say this is not working. So let's see what happens and work it out, and let's give it a chance.
Ms. Dion.
I don't think that any one person should be the face of economic development. I believe it should be a collaborative effort. I think there should be multiple people involved. With that said, I agree that we are on track for economic development. We have we have a downtown and waterfront urban renewal plans that are coming down the road. There are going to be multiple parcels of land that are going to be ready to be developed. I think that the present economic development individual has many irons in the fire. I think it's too soon to judge because the results haven't been recognized as of yet. And I think we need to allow time to see what will develop. And I think as we move on, we can, you can always streamline. You can always change. So I don't think we need to lock ourselves into one idea.
Mr. Malcolm.
So I think that the folks to my right and to my left made very good points. I myself personally know quite a few people on the Fall River Office of Economic Development, which I believe they did a great job in the past, and some differences between themselves as well as the mayor may have caused some of that split. I believe in whatever is working is what you run with. Being a former quarterback professionally and a leader, you have to run with what works. And if we have projects that are irons in the fire, as Michelle had mentioned, that are moving forward, and we have other ideas in the pipeline, then we need to work together in order to make those things happen. The only way those things happen is if people work together. And I don't think you can ever point a finger at an old way of doing things or a new way of doing things as being so much better, but that, you know, the proof is in the pudding. And again, like I said, and I will say many times after, that leadership and education and understanding all of these things as a whole will help to make our city better. And we need to have more inclusiveness, more inclusion, you know, feedback from our citizens. We have beautiful parks all over the place, but no one playing in them. We have beautiful places to visit, like the Battleship, but none of the locals go there. We have a beautiful waterfront that has not been developed, and we need to develop it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start our second round of questioning now. So back to Mike Sylvia from the Fall River Reporter, who will ask a question first to Joseph Camara.
So as you know, the current city council is exploring a city manager. It would bring in a mayor and a vice mayor who would become the president and vice president of the city council. What are your thoughts on bringing in a city manager into the city of Fall River in 2022 or later?
Well, I think that what we have in place right now works. It's worked for an awful long time. Unfortunately, we had an individual that didn't turn out to be the right person for that job. So therefore, it brought up this type of discussion. But I think for years and years and years, if we have a city charter with a strong mayor and a city council that is also in charge of the budget, it's also a strong council. People might not look at it that way, might say it's a weak council, but the council has a lot of authority. A lot of what goes on in the city is council-driven. So there's a lot of things that we can do. I don't believe that you're going to solve the problem by having a city manager who has 9 city councils that are going to vote on his contract and approve it. I think you get more problems because now you have a manager that's satisfying 9 city councils, where you have a mayor that just has to tell the public why he's going to do a good job or not, and then the council has to independently tell the public why they're going to do a good job or not, and then you see if they can all work together to make it work. It's worked in the city for many years. We've done a lot of wonderful things. Unfortunately, we ran across an individual that wasn't right for that position, and I supported him in the past. So I was fooled, as were many other people who supported him in the past, and I don't think that's the need to change the entire city form of government. So I don't think it's a good idea, and it's one that I don't support.
Ms. Dion.
I don't support the city manager idea either. One of the reasons that I don't is I feel you're taking the right of the voter away from them. Right now, the voters determine who leads the city. If we go to a management form of government, the members of the council would be the ones who would determine who the city manager would be, determine basically their length of service. If they felt they were, providing properly, they would keep them there. If not, they would be able to remove them. But I think you'd be taking the right away from the voter. Also, the vote would automatically determine who was president and who was vice president. And I think the council really, in essence, should be able to make that choice because the council has to work together, and the councilors have to have confidence in who's leading them. So I think that, they shouldn't lose their right to choose who has that position.
Mr. Malcolm.
So I don't believe personally in a city manager. I do believe that democracy should prevail and that the voter, being educated, should be able to decide who leads our city as mayor, that the city council will always be sort of a checks and balances to that, and that we as a community really need to start speaking up about what we feel is right and what we feel is wrong. So to take that power away from the mayor who is voted by the people, I think would undermine the authority of the citizens to be the deciders of who should be there and what direction our city should go in. And like Michelle and Joe said, I completely agree with them that if we had the right person in that position at this time of economic development and in this time of economic growth, we might have seen even greater gains in our city. So we need to stay conscious of, what the person has done before, where they are, and where they're headed to. And it's really important to learn from our past, plan for our future, but don't live in either. Each and every day we need to make count, and we need to work together in order to make that happen. So I would not be for a city planner. I think maybe the charter, our city's constitution, needs to be taken maybe a closer look at, and some things need to be changed. So for that, I would say that let democracy prevail. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Springer.
Yeah, I'm definitely against a city manager. As Councilor Kamara said, we've had a system in the city that has worked for a long time. I'm a big fan of don't fix what's not broken. Unfortunately, as Councilor Kamara said, we had one individual that wasn't quite qualified for the job and kind of put a bad cloud on the whole way the system works. It's you don't put a whole company under because the CEO is bad. You just hire a new CEO. So we have the charter in place to keep these checks and balances. We have the city council, which keeps the mayor in check and have these checks and balances. So I don't think a city administrator or a city is going to solve the problem. The mayor only has a 2-year term, so if we don't like what's going on, put that power back in the voter. Let them go out and vote to change the leader of the city. So I'm a very big fan of keeping that power back in the voter, not just in an appointed individual that could have essentially have too much power for too long.
Thank you. Mr. Tiff.
Wow. I mean, if we're gonna decide, for example, decide to take that direction, getting a city manager to come into Fall River, we are reinventing our government. And we shouldn't, because if we do that, we all fail. Not only city elected official, but also for the people as well. So we need to work together and strengthen up the area of weakness where we can work together as one instead of pointing at each other. Because city elected official is the co-founder of the backbone of our city. And we should not eliminate that. And the people who voted, they are the people who prevail the democracy. And I think the city management wouldn't be doing any good. We should work together instead, looking for that way. Because if one bad apple on the tree fall on the ground, it doesn't mean the whole apple tree is going to be bad. So we have to think about that.
Thank you. Our next question will be asked by Phil Devitt from the Herald News, and will be answered first by Mark Mollicone.
So the City Council this week moved discussion of several proposed streetscape projects to the Committee on Finance after it appeared that this series of roadway improvements might be scrapped altogether, due in part to cost and quality concerns. How would you like to see these street projects, in particular, move forward? And what role should the council have in similar revitalization efforts going forward?
Well, I think that's an excellent question, Phil. That's something that I feel very strongly about, since in the last 2 years I've blown out 5 tires and warped 2 rims. And I had to pay for it all by myself. I didn't go to the city, the government center, and ask for my money back. I do believe that as a council, we could oversight what's being done, how the money's being spent. I think it's very important to get as many streets done as well as possible. My being no stranger to construction, I realize that you get what you pay for, or should. And when you move forward with a project like streetscapes, you really have to stay on top of the contractor and subcontractors in order to know what's being done at what cost and how. In order for city street lights, directional lights, such as red lights and such, to not actually be figured in and to have the problems that we've had with certain companies is mind-boggling to me. Any project that you do, you really have to have a plan and understand where you're heading. So for myself, the money that was spent, I would rather have gotten 50 streets done than 3 main streets. I believe Plymouth Avenue needs to be done, North Main Street, South Main Street. I think we need to do some streetscapes in certain areas to, let folks know that we're serious about economic development, but we all need to work together and be responsible for what's being done.
Thank you. Mr. Springer.
Streetcapes, hot topic. I happen to be in the neighborhood of East Main Street, where the big controversy was over that streetscape. If anybody's drove down that road, I'm not a construction worker or anything, but I know it's probably not done correctly. So is dumping $1.5 million into a single street the answer? Probably not. If anybody drives around the city, probably 80% or more of the roads are quite an interesting ride to drive down, to say the least. So I'm definitely with Mr. Malcolm saying I'd rather see 30 or 40 streets get fixed and not worry about fancy lighting and all kinds of that stuff, and not worry about blowing out rims. And we just deserve better roads. I mean, I know we live in New England with the snow plows and things that damage these streets, but a sinking over $1 million into a single street, the right answer, I don't believe so. Like I said, just the debacle we went through with East Main Street, which is still not solved and nobody knows where the money's coming to fix this street, I think is a very good example of why it's not quite the right answer to what's going on with the streetscapes.
Mr. Tith.
Fall Rivers, the street is very important because I drove around too and also get flat tires as well. But, every project that we look into, we have to do an assessment, and also we have to go to the site to see how it's going to play out, and then we'll have to look into what money that's coming to spend, because just only 3 or 4 streets with a couple $1 million, you could get more street to fix it, and I believe that we could do more study on that. Not just say, hey, when it's time for a meeting with the administrators, say, hey, what is your plan? What is I would like, if I was elected, I would like to go to the site and ask question and ask the constructor, hey, can I see this, and who is your referral? I would like to go to them, check every point of view before making any decision.
Thank you. Mr. Camara.
So streetscapes, well, a long time ago, there was a gentleman named Mr. Shavs, the old Shavs Market down at the bottom of Columbia Street, and he pretty much started streetscapes when he donated a bunch of cobblestones to the city, and they fixed up the plaza and made it look really nice. Didn't cost the city any money, and it was a nice thing. I think he did it in conjunction with the city, but he donated a lot of that stuff, and it looked nice. We've never done a streetscapes project as long as I can remember for being on the council. And I supported streetscapes. I supported the concept. Let's beautify certain neighborhoods that had people who made investments in restaurants and businesses there that wanted to see the streets more user-friendly for pedestrians and parking and whatnot. But then you get into the details, and you find out that there's cost overruns that nobody anticipated. You find out that at the same time you're doing utility work, that the utility company made a mistake, and now when the project's done, they're going to come back up and dig it up again. Whose fault is that? Who are we going to blame? You find out that Liberty Utilities is going out through the entire city, putting in new gas mains, ruining the streets that we're fixing already, on top of the streets that we're planning on the streetscapes, and you're trying to coordinate all of that together. So I don't disagree with my colleagues and say maybe we should relook at this. Bedford Street project, I think, should definitely go forward with streetscapes. We spent $90,000 approximately on that project. I think it's a good project. It needs to continue. But looking at all the other streetscape projects that we have going on, we probably should do more investment in local streets. But at the same time, we got to bring in utility companies that are ruining our streets more than ever before at a record pace. We got to make sure that we get this under control so that Mr. Malcolm doesn't continue to ruin his tires in his car.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes, the city council definitely did vote to fund streetscapes. And I believe that infrastructure is very important and does play a role in economic development. However, with that said, even though the ideology was good, it unfortunately did not meet expectations. I believe that funding at this time should be suspended. There are certain portions, I believe, of projects that aren't complete that I think need to be evaluated so they can determine how, how much further they should move forward, and at least getting them to a place where they're sustainable, and this way they can determine where to put the funding next, what to do, what streets to take care of. I believe that oversight is paramount, that, you shouldn't just have an idea, roll out a plan, and then just let it go. I think one of the problems that they ran into, again, which caused some cost overruns, where I believe that they hit granite, they had to do some blasting. I say, surprise, surprise, I think that's why they call us the Granite City. I've learned on the campaign trail you can't even put a stake in the ground without hitting rock. So I don't think that should have been a big surprise, but apparently it was. So again, I think, yes, the funding should be suspended until it can be evaluated and determine the best possible option moving forward.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Pam Martin and will be answered first by Ricky Tiff.
Okay. Thanks, Keith. My second question deals with promoting diversity in our city employees, particularly teachers and first responders. I just had the privilege of meeting our first Cambodian police officer ever hired on the force. Great young man, he's excited for his job. So how do we make our police departments, our fire departments, our teachers more reflective of our mixed community here?
I think, I know the young man that you was talking about, because I talked with him, and he's excited to be on the force. Well, first, I think we need to educate more into the community about regarding, like, in a police station, what public safety and also fire department, how to be part of the daily job function and stuff, so they will understand. And these officers, they every day they go to work in there, like they always is always in a part of danger. So educating more them into the community about how we can encourage them to be part of the system.
Thank you. Mr. Camara.
Yeah, that's a great question. And like I said earlier, I speak 3 languages. My father's Portuguese, my mother's from Venezuela. I was born in this country. My wife's Arabic, she's Lebanese. We speak 4 different languages in our house, and I think that diversity is a great thing. I think what you need to do is make people realize that no matter where you come from, no matter what your beliefs are, religious or anything else, you can do and be anything you want to be. If you put the time in and you study and you work hard, you can accomplish great things in this world. And I think we shouldn't be building walls around any of our departments at all. I think we should be encouraging people to participate from all different ethnicities of life, because we are a melting pot. This city is a reflection of this country, and I think that the more people you can get from diverse communities to be involved locally at all forms of every aspect of government. Have them in City Hall, have them in the police department, fire department, teachers, you name it, public works. I think the more you can incorporate people and their different ethnicities, the better off we'll be as a city, as a world, as a planet. I encourage all of that.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
Yes, I think, when you live in a diverse world, you need diversity in all areas of employment. I think there are certain employment opportunities that require an education that some of the people who have moved here may not possess at this point in time. I think we need to instill an environment of learning that is inclusive and allows every child to thrive, so that, and instill in them that, all of these possibilities are out there. You can strive towards any form of employment that you want, so that they can gain the education, so that they can fill the teaching positions. And I also think that not all people are aware of how to apply for civil service positions either. There is a process to it. And I'm sure that there are people out there that don't even realize, you can start by going to City Hall and it's posted on the walls, the positions that are opened. what you need to have to qualify for those positions and how you go about the testing, et cetera. So I think it's a concerted effort. I think part of it's education and part of it is just awareness, but I definitely think the more diversity we have, the better.
Thank you. Mr. Malcolm.
So I think Joe and Michelle both brought up great points in that diversity is a great thing for our city, especially in the civil service aspect. I think we need to have a better outreach to folks in the community to get them involved and to give them the awareness and understanding of how to become civil servants in our city, both police, fire, EMTs. I have friends from all ethnicities. My father is Italian, my mother is Russian Jewish, Ukrainian Jew. I grew up, again, playing football and other sports, whether it was basketball, baseball, football, or track. Football was one of the most diverse sports that I had been involved in. And living in Miami for a year, I was able to encounter many diverse ethnicities, from Cuban to African American, inner city and suburban, as well as Hispanic and Asian even. And I embraced all of them. They were my teammates, they were part of my family, and I tried to understand their culture and themselves as well. So I think it's very important for a diverse city like ourselves to have a diverse city civil service folks out there to truly get out there and be a part of our community and to connect. It's very important, so.
Thank you. Mr. Springer.
Yeah, diversity. Fall River is quite literally built on diversity and immigrants. This is what built our city. This is what made us incredible right from the start. So working in the medical fields and in real estate, I meet people from different walks of life, religion, sex, color, every single day of my life. I can tell you quite literally they all bleed red. And quite literally, if your house is on fire or you need to go to the hospital, you're not going to care about that person's sex, color, religion, whatever the case is. So as long as they're qualified for the job, they have the right qualifications, they can meet the standards for that particular job, absolutely diversity. Is it something that needs to be more of? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some jobs are predominantly more one way or another, so maybe giving some education to some people saying, hey, I mean, look at recently, we just hired our first female firefighter ever. That's incredible. How long has the city had a fire department? We just got a female. So that's a step in absolutely in a positive direction. So I think that's a great step in the right direction, and diversity is going to be like I said, what we're built on. So that's great to have those jobs available.
Thank you. Up next is Alan Zarek to ask our next question, and it will be answered first by Michelle Dion.
Should Fall River institute term limits for school committee, city council members, and the mayor?
Though many people disagree with me, I feel that voting is term limits. You have the ability every 2 years to determine who will sit on and who won't sit on the city council, who will be in the mayor's office, who will be a school committee member. And I understand that people say, well, many have been there for many, many years. Well, we've had the opportunity to change them every 2 years, because to me, it's a double-edged sword. So to one person, there may be somebody in a seat that they don't feel should be there, that never seems to be voted out, but yet the other side of it is they may have somebody who's a seated counselor who they think should be there for forever. I think very often it's a matter of perception, who's there, who they believe should be there or shouldn't be there at any given moment. So the long and the short of it for me is I believe that voting is term limits.
Thank you. Mr. Malcolm.
So for myself, I agree with some of what Michelle has to say as far as democracy and voting really does determine term limits. However, I would not be against term limits, considering I think folks can be complacent, their ideas somewhat get stale possibly, or they get stuck in what's known as either a rut or, in their own ways. And it's very difficult to get 9 people to agree on anything, much less one person who's been somewhere for a very long time, to be open-minded and understanding of new ideas, diversity, and a better way. For myself, I pride myself on being open-minded, understanding, being able to put on someone else's shoes and understand where they're coming from. I routinely go back to where I'm from, Rolling Green. I drive around there probably every 3 to 4 months to remember where this little redheaded boy came from, and it's very important to remember where you came from. So for me, I hope that my ideas never get stale and that my leadership never grows old, but I would be in favor of term limits, I think, both on the city level and also the national level for our state reps, our senators, as well as obviously our president. So if it works at the presidential level, it could work at any other level. Thank you.
Mr. Springer.
Yeah, so Mr. Malco made most of the points I wanted to address. I am definitely in favor of term limits. I think some people in any employment, doesn't matter if it's political or private sector, if you're in that job for a long time, you can kind of get into a routine per se, where you're just kind of going with the motions. I'm a big fan of new faces, new blood, new ideas. It's a body of 9, so like he said, getting one person's idea doesn't really have a huge weight. You have to get the vote of 5 or better to get that to pass. So term limits, I think, are a positive thing. I think they keep the system new, refresh, new faces, new ideas. What the magic term limit is, I don't know. So when those votes come up, I think that's where the voter can decide if they want to go on to another term. So definitely a fan of term limits, keeping new faces, new blood, new ideas. I think that's very important to keep in any entity moving forward in the right direction.
Mr. Tiff.
I believe we could give it a try. After all, we in the city of give it a try. Because, for 2 years, I don't think it's a lot of opportunity for any elected official to get the works done. Because by the time he worked on a project, and then next thing you know, the year's coming up again, and then the project is going to be gone. So definitely we should look into it, and if it's not working, we go back to the same as we are right now. But it's always an opportunity or process to keep it as consideration for the term.
Mr. Kamara.
Well, I don't think there's a CEO in the country that would fire a good employee because they've been there for too long. My wife works at Rhode Island Hospital. This year, she celebrates 30 years as an employee of Rhode Island Hospital. I worked for 20 years in an import company, and after that company was sold, I currently work at another company for the past 12 years. So if someone's doing a good job, I think they deserve to keep their job. And the people have every 2 years, as Michelle says, she's right, I have a 2-year term. And then I have to go back and re-identify myself to the public and tell people why it is that they should select me to the city council again. And then again 2 years from now if I want to keep that job. And again 2 years later if I want to keep that job. And the public determines whether or not we will have the right counselor there. I don't think it's a job where you get stagnant. I don't think it's a job where you can't go to the city council meetings. You can't participate in committee meetings if you don't enjoy it, if you don't think your heart's into it 100%. The people who don't, trust me, they don't get reelected. And we've had a lot of change in the council. We've had some people that have been there for some time. I've been there for 24 years. Very grateful that the people have put their trust and faith in me to continue to do that job. But every election, we get three new councilors, 4 new councilors. 1/3 of the council is mixed practically every election. When I was elected, there were 6 of us that were new. And it happens. A few years ago, there were 5 new councilors. So the people in this community, they know who deserves to get elected or not, and that's who they decide to vote for.
Thank you.
So I don't agree with term limits.
Our next question will be asked by Don Amata and will be answered first by Matthew Springer.
Thinking about your personality traits and how you present yourself to the world, what subcommittee would you like to serve on the city council? What strength would you bring? And on the flip side of that, which subcommittee would you, for lack of a better word, avoid?
I think I bring a pretty strong community with the, I've been involved with real estate for quite a long time, with owning a home. So I'm very in tune with tenants, landlords, how those different things that the city does affects those people directly and indirectly. So I think I come with a little bit of knowledge and understanding to that aspect of what most people need as a house. Where I would have a little weaknesses is ordinances. I've never been involved in making laws or changes or how different things are changed in the community every single day. So that's something I would kind of not want to be so involved in as far as when it comes to real estate and land and housing and those different things that affect our citizens every single day, because I've been in tune with it since I was 25 years old.
Thank you. Mr. Tiff.
I think I will be in the area of like tourism, and because why I say why I'm so interested in that, because I feel that I could be an asset of bringing more people into the city, because as I develop, our organization developed the festival called Southeast Asia. It was the the festival one of a kind. We was able to do it for a short term to bring a lot of ethnicity come into the city, and that's the component that I want to say, hey, this is Fort River, and we have a festival going on here. And it did attract a lot of people coming in, because now they question, wow, why is such a small city? They have they have Hmongs, have Laos, Cambodian, Thais, doing this performance at the waterfront, because the waterfront is beautiful. And I think Fort River, moving forward, we need to make more festival into the waterfront by working together with the city official and with the nonprofit and with the people and stuff, so make them more welcoming. Because the more we show a city, the more people in the world look at it, because right now we have a social media that is a very powerful tool to use. So why we take that for granted?
Thank you. Mr. Kamara.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've served on every subcommittee there was. I like them all, actually. The only problem with subcommittees is that some subcommittees, there's more action than others, and that's just the nature of the way we are. Public Works and Transportation is always going to have more issues than Environmental Affairs. Not to say that Environmental Affairs doesn't have its issues, but they're not as often and they're not as frequent, and they don't come before the council as much. The Regulations Committee has a lot of action going on. The Ordinance Committee certainly does as well. And everyone serves on the Finance Committee, which is always at every council meeting. And some committees, you don't get that type of action. But I think, I've never told the president of the council that I don't want to serve on this committee. I always tell them, whatever you need me to serve on, that's what I'll serve on. You can pick it. And what the council president does is they look at people's strengths and weaknesses and say, will this individual fit on this? Is he able to do this and that? And they put three individuals, except for the Ordinance Committee, where that's 5, on a committee together that can work well together and help suit the needs of that committee. They're all busy at certain times, some a lot more action than others. Economic development, sometimes it's got a lot of action going on, sometimes it doesn't, depending on what's going on. But I like serving on them all. I don't think any of them are very boring. They're all interesting when you're in a subcommittee, and whether it's economic development or regulations, the people that are there discussing the issues, it's always something that needs to be fixed and addressed, so it makes it interesting. So I don't mind serving on any of them. I've served on all of them, and hopefully I'll continue to serve on them.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
Thank you. As a city councilor, I would serve on whatever committee they choose to place me on. I am not a person who is afraid to learn. I am not afraid to roll up my sleeves, dig in, and tackle a problem. I do like the idea of being on the Youth and Elders Committee. I don't feel that gets enough attention. I would like to bring the youth and the elder to the table. I think we need to have more programs, and I think I think it's just a committee that can just help. And I think hopefully it could be a place that people who don't feel connected could finally feel like they are connected and have a connection. And the other committee that I find very intriguing is the Committee on Ordinances, because I do tend to be a right is right, wrong is wrong kind of person. And to me, that's a big part of their role.
Thank you. Mr. Malcolm.
So for myself, I'm by birth a Pisces, and I tend to get along with just about any and everyone. I fashion myself a leader, one that leads by example, someone that stayed at the University of Alabama during the summer. One mandatory session, I actually stayed for both summer sessions and was the only one that did so on the team. So I would put the time and effort into whatever subcommittee I was asked to go on. There isn't one in particular I would want to be a part of, or one that I would not, because I would want to be a part of all of them. I would want to have an understanding and a say, so to speak, in every reach of our city, because I think I have a tremendous amount to offer, not only as a leader, but as a person and someone who grew up here and has traveled across the globe. And I think that Michelle touched on something that's very near and dear to my heart. The youth and the elderly. I have been meeting with youth and elderly throughout my life, whether it was a fundraiser or a foundation, and it wasn't just recently. These are things I've always reached out to, as well as Special Olympics, which I had been a part of as well. So what I'd like to say is I'd like to be more inclusive to people that are younger, folks that are elderly, and really understand how to include more people and get more education out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's start our third round of questioning now. We'll go back to Mike Sylvia from the Fall River Reporter, who will ask a question first to Matthew Springer.
So it's obvious the most successful students in school have involved parents. What ideas would you have to get parents more involved in their child's education?
Great question. I don't have children, so this is kind of a little tough one for me to touch on. But from what I understand with coworkers and colleagues that I work with, some of them open up their children's homework and they look at it and they go, I don't even know how to solve what's going on. I guess apparently some of the stuff that's being taught to very low grade education is very difficult. So maybe some more communication between the teachers and the parents on articulating what's going on. We have so many forms of communications now with email and Facebook and all these kind of things that I think it's very easy for them to put up maybe a video or something to that effect that can really get the connection with the student and the parent a little easier, rather than opening up a notebook from the teacher and saying, here's your homework, and them saying, well, how do I solve this? So that's a great question. Obviously, education is the backbone of most communities. That's where a child starts. If we're not giving them a good start, we're setting them up for failure. So having that communication with the teacher, the student, and the parent is obviously very, very vital in making sure that child's education is going to prosper for that student.
Thank you. Mr. Tith.
As a parent as a father for, I see the way the school right now communicating, especially the teachers, they do an email, text and stuff. And I think we do everything that we can, try to encourage the parent to come in. But if some parents, they don't understand or read English and stuff, and some, they just like, okay, we don't want to see it, but mostly on Facebook. But so maybe we try to attack more into the parents by encouraging them, like, and doing, for report card times, and also for going, sending email letters to them, stuff, and try to encourage more, because I think it's not that we lack of communication with the parent. It's just we had to find ways to attract them to get more involved with their kids, to get more involved with the school. So we have to look into some of the area that is more fundamental.
Thank you. Mr. Camara.
That's a great question. And, it gets back to diversity as well. There are a lot of parents who don't speak English fluently, struggle understanding the language, and therefore they're turned off about going and attending school and talking to teachers, parent-teacher night, talking to teachers what they can do best. I think having the right people in the schools is key. Having the people who can reach out to parents, having people who speak the language that the parents speak makes it a lot easier. They don't want to be there with their student translating back and forth every sentence. Making the school an inviting place, making it somewhere where parents will feel comfortable to go there with their children, after-school programs, whatnot, making it as friendly and user-friendly and as friendly as possible so that these parents will be used to going there, comfortable going there, having programs in place that can interact with students and parents together. It's something that we need to focus more on, because when I talk to parents, the first thing they tell me is that, and it's mostly people who have struggled with the English language, is that it's tough for them to go there and then not be able to talk to anyone without having someone they can talk to in their own in their own native language. So that's one of the things that we need to do more of. And also, there are just some parents that, regardless how hard you try, because of the way that they live and they're working 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs, it's difficult to make them go and participate in these events. So maybe sometimes we need to reach out and go see them and have more people reach out to them to make them know that, their son's making progress or their daughter's making progress in different things and bring them together. But it's a great question. It's something that we need to do more of, and it's the key to turning around education.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
Yes, I agree also that as time has gone on, the new math, people don't understand it. But a lot of us, we were great at the basics, we were great even, with the fractions and many things like that, but the new math is just so foreign. And I don't even understand how you can teach a child that when you do a register in a checkbook, you round it off. How do you round off a checkbook? I think a lot of people would bounce many more checks if we did that. So I think that's one of our problems. We also live in a society where now very often both parents have to work. That has made education more remote for the parents because they don't have the time, they don't have the availability to get involved. The emphasis on testing has also made it more remote. I think we need to return to a more traditional form of educating, and which would make it more parent-friendly. Putting the emphasis on testing and not on learning and teaching, I think has been a great detriment to our educational system.
Thank you. Mr. Malacone.
I agree with Michelle in that sometimes you have to revert back to some of the old ways. We find ways of innovating and teaching kids new methods to problem solve. But in order to get parents involved, for me, I do have 2 children. I know that daycare can be extremely costly. Working a job very hard and trying to be the best that you can be at your place of employment can take up a lot of time. I personally owned my own insurance agency, and it took up a lot of time because it's relationship-based. So for me, I think the one way to get parents more involved in the student and their affairs would be to have some type of meetings where it's not just about school, but it's about getting to know the parents, their situation, and maybe we do have to have an outreach where we go to the home and offer some type of food. I know that's one thing that would definitely get me to come to the schools if they had a dinner. I know we've done plenty of chow mein dinners and soup stuff at some of the high rises and whatnot, and that always brings people out. So to bring me to the school as a parent, I think food would definitely be a fine way to get me there. But also being interested in the children's education, we just need to find a way to educate the parents and get them into the schools and understand.
Thank
and
you.
I think maybe New School might do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Being respectful of time, I'd like to try to get one more question out, but what we'll do is we'll ask the candidates to answer in 1 minute instead of 90 seconds. So we'll have one more question from Phil Devitt from the Herald News, and that'll be answered by Joseph Camara first.
Okay, well, some of you touched on this in your answers to the first question. So this country's opioid crisis continues to hit home, cutting lives short, hurting people of all ages and backgrounds, and taxing emergency services. What role should the city play in combating this growing problem?
Well, that's another great question. And I'm glad you recognize that this is not a city isolated problem, it's a country problem. We're currently in a lawsuit with a lot of other cities, communities throughout the country. And I think that what we need to do is just restrict the number of opioids that doctors can prescribe to people, first of all, because that's one of the biggest problems we're having. They deliberately know what they're doing, and nothing's being done to stop that. And the drug companies are abusing it as well. And I think you have to put regulations in place that limit what they can give out to certain individuals to stop them from getting in that situation to begin with. So I would support any type of regulation that would limit, the early on stages of when people get into this predicament.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
I believe that there should be a cap on each community as to what we're capable of treating, how many people we're capable of helping. I think it should be a shared responsibility. I think all communities should be involved in it. It shouldn't be restricted to one community. I also believe that each and every addict has a path that led them to where they are. I believe that not only do we need to treat the addiction, but we need to treat the soul, and we need to treat the person to heal, try to help to heal whatever it is that caused the addiction, which obviously in their life would continue to be a trigger in their addiction. You know, it's something that, you know, this problem didn't start yesterday. We allowed it to happen, and it's not going to end tomorrow. It's something we're going to have to work
Thank you.
on long-term.
Thank you. Mr. Malcolm.
So for myself, I have a very close friend from the age of 3 or 4 years old. We were best friends in Rolling Green. When I moved away at the age of 13 or 14, that's when he went down that path of addiction. Somewhat feeling responsible myself for not being there for him. Addiction is near and dear to my heart. I believe we have to have educational programs not only for the addict, but as well for folks who are outside or in the community, so that we can get addicts back out into the real world and you know, focused on being, you know, part of the community and also getting back to working. My best friend, who will remain nameless, we had breakfast last week. He's currently working. He's a great father. He has been a great father. He's had some stumbling blocks, but education at an early onset, early education for children not to go down that road, and later on also educating
Thank you.
is important.
Thank you. Mr. Springer.
Yeah, so obviously opioids are a terrible tragedy, not just here in Fall River, but it's a nationwide thing. From what I understand, our programs like STAR, their first stay is, I think, only 6 days, if I'm quoted. So I think that's obviously not enough time to cure somebody that's been on this path for a long time. So I think they need more treatment time in those particular programs. Another thing I'm a big advocate for is educating the youth younger on the dangers of these things and exploring more natural remedies. Unfortunately, the government has put a lot of red tape on opening up these natural remedy stores, and I think there needs to be a little more maybe education process and ways that we can curb this epidemic by using more natural ways rather than all these prescription painkillers that put these people in a predicament that they can never get out of.
Thank you. Mr. Tiff.
Drug is a federal big issue, and as a local city, we only could help to educate the people in our community as well by working with private organizations, like for example STAR, to see what they do every day, and to also educate in school to make sure they don't have any use any drug, especially also reach out to citizens who have dealt with the problem. You know, try to encourage them by creating more events. Because I did a couple events with some people who go through those paths, and when they talk about their life story and stuff, and it's very heartwarming to see how they turn around. And I don't think we should take them for granted.
Thank you, Mr. Tiff. Time now for our 90-second closing statements, and our first closing statement tonight will be delivered by Ricky Tiff.
The city, we are in the city of Macon here. It was built in pursuit of American dreams, and like I was once back home, I migrated from Cambodians in 1975. But luckily, I have the opportunity to sit up here and speak to you, the voter, about to be part of the city. And I hope it will be a strong encouragement for everybody else that is minority or to be minority or immigrants to take part of the city, because this is our city and it's beautiful, and we should help each other moving forward together instead of finger pointing. So hopefully on November 5th, hope you give me an opportunity to work for you, because I'm ready to roll up my sleeve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Camara.
First of all, let me begin by thanking you, Keith. You did a wonderful job tonight. Also want to thank the Fall River Reporter, the Fall River Herald News, FRG TV, WSAR, and for community media as well. Thank you very much. I also want to thank the residents and people that are watching this at home. My wife and I were both first-generation Fall River-born residents here. We raised our 3 children here in our home. Our children all attended the Fall River public school systems. I truly believe that Fall River is a great place to raise a family, work, and earn a living here. I take this job very seriously. I've run for city council a long time ago to make improvements, and I feel I've done that. I've talked earlier about the infrastructure improvements I've made, the improvements in public safety, and improvements in education. This is, something that I take very seriously. Talk to a lot of different people about a lot of different issues, get their ideas, put their things in place, and then bring it to the council chambers, and hopefully we make this city much better than what it was when I first came to the council. So I don't want to get on too much, but I love this community. I've served with a lot of different city councils, a lot of good city councils, served a lot of good mayors, served a lot of good people in this community. The department heads here do a wonderful job. We all have one thing in common. We all want to make Fall River a better place. I'm very fortunate that the people have put me there to help be a part of that. And on November 5th, I respectfully ask for your continued support so I can continue to make this place a better city. So I appreciate one of your 9 votes on November 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
Thank you. Yes, I would like also to thank everybody that's here that took their time to ask us the questions, everybody who took the time to watch and listen. I would like to reach out to you today to humbly and respectfully ask for your vote in the municipal election this year on Tuesday, November 5th. I am an advocate for community policing for a safer city, affordable housing for those on fixed and moderate incomes, public safety, fiscal responsibility in government, programs for our youth to keep them active and positive members of our society, and to continue our effort to overcome addiction. As your city councilor, I will put the community first. I will put the people first. I think it's time to move our city in a positive and constructive direction. We must restore confidence in government, and if I may, I would like to go back to where I lost my place and lost my mind on the cannabis question and state that no, I don't think one person should be the face of it. I think there should be a committee, and that committee should include somebody from the medical field, law enforcement, the city council, school committee, and someone who's involved in treatment for addicts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Malacone.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank everyone for having me here, for giving me a voice, and for hopefully on November 5th earning your trust and respect enough to vote for me on November 5th. I was born and raised here. Like I said, I've lived all over. I've experienced many things in my life. I have family that are military. I've experienced many things, been through cancer myself, had 13 months of chemotherapy, every day had to pass the Jimmy Fund in order to get to my infusion, and it made me realize just how precious life is. Our community has been through a tremendous amount in the last few years. I think that things will get much better with leadership and with community, including people, getting people involved, education, and also fighting for what I had said earlier, the Promise and Cherish Act, and bringing $1.5 billion to urban cities and communities throughout the Commonwealth, because we are at a disadvantage educationally. There's just not enough tax money to support what we need to do in order to move forward as a community and to have economic redevelopment. So I'd like to be more inclusive. I'd like to use what God gave me, 2 ears and 1 mouth, listen twice as much as I speak, and to be a representative of the people. Again, we are resilient, and we can work together.
Thank you.
In our blue-collar community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Springer.
First off, thank you guys so much. This has probably been one of the most humbling and honoring experiences of my life, just being able to get nominated to get the chance to serve the community that I've lived in my entire life. So on that note, what I want to say to the voters out there is, one thing I believe in is not making promises I can't keep. One thing I pride myself is saying whatever administration is in place at that time, I will work with them to make the best decisions for our community. I'm a hardworking homeowner, taxpayer, just like everybody else in this city. I've never been involved in city politics or government in my entire life, so I have zero prior agenda for running for office other than the fact that I truly do love our city. I wanted to make it have a voice, to be somewhere we can all prosper and be a proud place that we all live and are proud to say, I'm from Fall River. So with that being said, the time for change is now. We've all talked about it. Get out and vote on November 5th. I would be honored to serve as your city councilor and to be your voice in our government. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank the candidates and the panelists for participating in tonight's forum. Also want to thank our FRC media staff working behind the scenes, Michelle Dumas, Steve Rice, and our timekeeper tonight, Lucy Cabral. I also want to thank Sean Elliott and his staff here at Bristol Community College for accommodating us here in the theater. You can watch a replay of this forum and find out more about all the candidates running for office by tuning into FRC Media Channel 95, as well as our website, frcmedianews.org. For those watching live, we invite you to stay with us. We'll be back in about a half hour at 8 p.m. We'll be hosting our second City Council panel of the night. And also make sure to join us on election night, as we'll be working with our colleagues at FRG TV to provide coverage of the election results. So for all of us here, thank you and have a good night. Good evening. Fall River Community Media is pleased to sponsor tonight's forum featuring the candidates running for Fall River City Council. My name is Keith Tebow, Director of FRC Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator for tonight's event. This is the second of our two City Council forums tonight. All candidates were invited to participate, and the makeup of our two panels was determined via a drawing. The candidates joining us tonight for our second panel are, in alphabetical order, Stephen Camara, Tim Cole, Colin Dias, Pam LaLiberty LeBeau, Trot Lee, Christopher Peckham, Linda Pereira, and Cliff Ponte. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Also joining us is a panel of journalists that will be asking the questions of the candidates tonight. Joining us are Michael Sylvia of the Fall River Reporter, Phil Devitt from the Herald News, Pam Martin from FRG TV, Alan Zarek of WSAR, and Don Amata from FRC TV. Our timekeeper tonight from FRC Media is Lucy Cabral, also sitting with our panelists tonight. The format of tonight's forum is as follows. Our event will last 90 minutes. There will be no opening statements, but each candidate will be allowed a 90-second closing statement. Each candidate will answer every question posed by our panelists and will have 90 seconds to answer each question. There will be no rebuttals. Prior to each question, we will randomly draw a candidate's name, and that candidate will respond to the question first. We'll then work our way around the rest of the candidates so everyone has an opportunity to answer the question. Candidates will only be asked to answer a question first once. In the event that all candidates were not selected to answer a question first, there will be another drawing from those remaining to determine who will give his or her closing statement first. We are ready to go. We'll get right to our first question. It'll be asked by Michael Sylvia from the Fall River Reporter, and will be answered first by Stephen Camara.
So my question depends on if you're an incumbent or a non-incumbent. So for incumbents, since you've been on the city council, what accomplishments are you most proud of? For the non-incumbents, what's the number one thing you hope to accomplish if you're elected to the city council?
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Keith, and FRC Media for sponsoring this event. Before beginning, I'd like to wish Tim Cole a happy birthday. Thank you. Over the years, I've participated in many issues. I'm most proud, though, of what I've done over the last 9 months, specifically as it relates to forming and asking the council president to form and forming in conjunction with the council president a task force to consider how we govern. As an urban policy analyst and as a political scientist, I've studied government both academically and now through decades of service, both as a school committee member and as a city councilor. And I am convinced that it's time for us to consider a city manager form of government. We've had over the last decade turmoil and turnover And the lack of stability in governing is a cost to all of us. So, this 7-member committee, a very diverse committee composed of school committee member, community activists, business people, studied over 9 months various city manager forms of government in Lowell, Worcester, Cambridge. We had people brought in, and we looked at the possibility. I'm most proud now that we've submitted a proposal that sits in the ordinance committee and hopefully will be forthcoming soon. So that comes first. And now to a very specific...
Thank you. Mr. Cole.
Sure. So, as a non-incumbent, my number one priority for accomplishment would be to develop a stronger system for our homeless and opioid addicts. I have been advertising in my campaign materials that I'd like to put together a volunteer to work program for the homeless and addicted. I believe that this program can work in terms of, for one, bettering the city. So the idea is that they would volunteer to help out, enroll in a program that could provide them with some funds at the completion of the program. The idea is the funds might be used to be a down payment, or like a first or last month's rent security deposit or something on an apartment. In combination, in doing this, I think part of the funding can come from signs that I would like to have advertising, saying something like, Fall River Cares, please don't feed the habit. Donate your, or send your donations to the homeless and addicted to this dedicated text number. I think that would help alleviate some of the panhandling and provide some funding for the program. I believe that we need to have prevention, stronger prevention, early intervention, and recovery for both of these problems.
Thank you. Mr. Dias.
Thank you for the question, Mike. As a non-incumbent, one priority I would wish to work on to accomplish is actually restoring honest government to our community. And I actually have a 4-point plan to do so. One, which is a ban on political donations by City Hall employees within City Hall. A second would be common sense term limits for city councilors. When I say common sense, which I mean is my vision for that would be a incumbent councilor can run for 2 consecutive terms, and then they must take a 2-year moratorium. So therefore, we have an influx of new people, new ideas, fresh ideas, and we can move the community forward. And at the same time, councilors who do a great job with the community can continue to serve after the 2-year moratorium. Third would be an independent ethics review team. I know there's been a lot of talk about the lack of transparency with the last administration, and I want to see a complete review of what went wrong and how we can go forward in the future and what steps we need to take. And lastly would be a blind hiring process. I believe an individual should be hired based on what they know and what their experience is and what their resume holds in, and not who they know in the mayor's office. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Elizabeth LeBeau.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for the question. I am very proud as an incumbent to always be a champion for our public safety, for our police and fire and EMS, for not only personnel but equipment that they need. It's something that I originally campaigned on and have continued through 2 terms. Through this last term, I was finally able to get the street sweeping program up and operating, which wasn't easy as we went through 4 different DCM directors. So every time someone came in, we had to start all over again. It went through a pilot program and now is an up and running system. And it was done and implemented properly with the help of DCM and the traffic director. But I've worked with Heart to Hope on getting them a homeless drop-in center. And right now I'm working on a policy that would go through any administration. It would continue on an inclement weather policy for a warming center or a center where government center would open, and how that would operate, whether it's 110 degrees or a hurricane or 6 inches of snow for our homeless residents. It's something I'm passionate about. But what I think I'm most proud of over the last 4 years is how accessible I have been to the residents of Fall River, answering any questions and concerns that they have, whether it's a pothole or something major. That it doesn't matter if it's big or small to them, it's important. So I pride myself on being very accessible to the residents.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Hello, thank you for having me, and thank you for the question. I'd like to point out that our city has probably been about at least 30 to 25 years behind environmentally. We're always behind this bar when we talk about our environment, we talk about the recycling, we talk about every single thing that we've done, contaminated landfills, you name it, we've been behind the bar. I believe that the purple bag situation has not resolved all our problems, whether we kept them or whether we got rid of them when it comes to the environment. We have a lot of problems still. Street sweeper program is back, but we have a lot of problems with our littering. We have needles all over the street. I plan on being a city councilor that goes after addressing environmental needs in the community. I'd like to implement a composting program. I'd like to revamp how we get rid of our waste altogether. Right now, we have our yard composting going to Tiverton. We have our recycling going to Connecticut, $100 a ton. It's costly. It's not good for our environment, and I would love to accomplish and have everyone involved in the process as well of making Fall River a more environmentally conscious and environmentally safe community. Thank you.
Mr. Pickham.
Yes, great question. Excuse me. Something that I would like to tackle if I get the chance to be elected, like Mr. Cole said, opiate addiction holds a very special place in my heart. I've mentioned it many, many times over the course of my campaign so far. Come from a heroin-addicted family. Over the past 20-some-odd years, I've watched my brother struggle and enter rehab, enter detox, and it failed over and over and over again. I've looked into ways, I've reached out to some experts nationwide, actually, that have given me some ideas and shown me some of the research that they've done. Some of the ideas that we've thrown back and forth is a multi-jurisdictional collaboration between Fall River and the surrounding towns. The surrounding towns, such as Swansea, Somerset, Freetown, don't have detox facilities or rehabilitation facilities for that matter, so their addicted come here for help, okay? There's no reason why the city of Fall River should be footing the bill for the surrounding towns. What I would like to see done is, instead of having multiple methadone clinics throughout the city, I've mentioned this recently, we have almost as many as the city of Boston. I believe we have as many as the city of Boston. I would like to see one facility that handles dual diagnosis, the recovery, the mental health. That way, when the people are there getting the help that they need, they're handling both issues. And when they hit the street, they're not going back to the first issue that caused the addiction.
Thank you. Ms. Pereira.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you for allowing us to have this forum. I think I have to answer this in twofold because I was on the city council for a number of years. We talk about contaminated land. Fall River had 7 acres of contaminated land. It came down that they wanted Republic, give the 7 acres to Republic. Republic will cover it. It won't cost the city a dime. But you're giving them 7 acres. When that came before the council, I objected to that, and I'm not one that objects often. Because of my objection, we were able to sit down with Republic and get 50% of what they made on profits. That brought in $1 million from somebody else's pocket, not from our taxpayers' pocket. I secured a $500,000 grant, again, without taxpayer funding, for Dave's Beach. That's why you have the floater ramp there. I created the Youth and Elder Affairs Committee on the City Council. That started the Durfee After Prom Party. I did the Commission on Disabilities. Right now, I want to work on doing more with our youth. Don't want to see people, young people, getting addicted to drugs, but we need to start taking care of our youth and having things for them to do. I also want to resurge Dave's Beach area because we're surrounded by water and we can't put a toe in it. It's not fair, and families need a place to go, a picnic area. I want to work on that, and I want to brighten the lights of the city. Something's going on with the lights in this city. They're too dim, and I'm going to find out why. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ponte.
Thank you. And one of the first things I learned when getting elected to the City Council 4 years ago was that in order to accomplish anything as a City Councilor, you need to be able to work with your colleagues. Many people who have been on the City Council for as many years recognize the fact that in order to get anything done, you need the support of your colleagues. And if you're not on the City Council and you're new to the City Council, you're going to find that out really, really fast. Some of the things that I'm proud that I was able to accomplish with my colleagues is to advocate for financial stability, advocate for strong economic development, advocate for strong public safety. I could sit here and go through a litany of things. Just about 3.5 years ago, when the prior administration wanted to sell our trash trucks for $500,000, it was the council at that time who advocated to go out and rebid for those trash trucks, and we got over $1 million for those trash trucks. We can talk about financial stability when I challenged the administration, took a strong stance on the fact that I wasn't satisfied with their revenue projections, so I held them accountable, and my colleagues and I worked to eliminate some items in their revenue numbers so that there was excess money available in their budget going forward. I could sit and talk about the capital items and the capital items that the city needs when it comes to police, fire, MIS, water, and public safety that are an important part of moving this community forward. So one of the biggest accomplishments that I say that we have had as a community, as a council, is being able to work together to get things done. And even if you disagree on something, we can all go to bed at night knowing that we put our best foot forward. So that's one thing I'm very proud to say.
Thank you. Our next question will be asked by Phil Devitt from the Herald News and will be answered first by Pam LaLiberty LeBeau.
The mayor is currently the only local official who signs off on letters of non-opposition and host community agreements for marijuana companies that are seeking to set up shop in Fall River. State Rep Carol Fiola has filed a bill that would require those companies to seek approval from a majority of locally elected officials in a community. In Fall River's case, that would be the council. Would you support this measure, and how much oversight do you think the council should have in the approval process?
Great question. One that's been in the news a lot lately, and I do support Rep. Fiola's measure. But it's unfortunate that it had to get that far. A lot of cities and towns took it upon themselves, or mayors took it upon themselves, to not be that sole position. That didn't happen here in Fall River, and unfortunately we are suffering from the fallout from that. I'm not sure if it should just be the council involved, or if it should be a committee of different people on the subject, experts in the subject, planning. Everything needs to be involved. Right now we have in our council office all of the information that was given to us on how different companies were selected and how they were even given a letter. And we don't even have a process for that. So not so much just the committee, but the process from start to finish. Everybody should be asked the same things. Everybody should be in a public process. Everybody should be given the opportunity to ask for a letter. It shouldn't be, unfortunately, the way that it happened here. So whether it's just the council, I'm not sure about that. I think it needs to be a little bit broader of a committee, and of course, the mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
The premise of Carol Fiola's proposal, I agree with. I think that it gives you an opportunity to have more eyes on the situation, so that way there is some level of accountability. I never would approve of a single individual being the sole person that allows for this process to happen, because there's just way too many, even a perception of corruption I'm not comfortable with, and I don't think the city would be comfortable with as well. So yeah, I would agree with most of her proposal on that, to get more eyes on it. I agree also with the idea of having some type of committee that's dedicated to oversight of the process as well.
Thank you. Mr. Peckham.
I'm going to echo some of that. I believe that the opposition letter should not be solely the responsible of one individual. I believe there should be a committee, maybe somebody from the zoning board, since I've heard quite a few complaints as to where some of these facilities wanted to be placed. That would fall under zoning, licensing, city council, as Ms. LeBeau stated, maybe an expert on the subject matter, and work in collaboration to cover all aspects of it before the letter's actually given out. That way there's no questions to be answered afterwards.
Thank you. Ms. Pereira.
I think the Cannabis Control Commission missed the mark on this. It's a new industry coming into the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I don't think that they dotted all their i's and crossed all their t's. I think that the city dropped the ball. There should have been ordinances put in place as to where these facilities can be located, and everyone should have an opportunity to get a letter of non-opposition if they come forward. There were some people that told me they couldn't even get an appointment with the mayor. And if you are going to do and give someone a letter of non-opposition, they absolutely shouldn't have to pay for it. That's ridiculous. As far as limiting them, that's another issue that has been brought up on the council. I don't understand why you're not going to limit marijuana facilities, but you limit package stores and you limit liquor licenses, so when you have a new business coming in, like the Asian restaurant that opened up at Stafford Square, they waited over a year to get a beer and wine license. That's ridiculous. So why do they have to wait? If you want economic growth, then maybe we need to look at broadening parameters too for a business like that. But I think that they need to look at the ordinances, and I don't think a committee should be put together. I think your elected leaders, members of the city council, should be together to look at what works and what locations and which letters of non-opposition we would give. Thank you.
Mr. Ponte.
Thank you. So who's mastered this fantastic is New Bedford. Fall River has definitely dropped the ball when it comes to how they send their letters of non-opposition, and I guess we could all point fingers at each other on who's responsible. I think we learned a lesson that if we give one specific individual all the power to grant letters of non-opposition, we see where we're at today, where we're dealing with the issues that we face. How New Bedford does it is with structure, and it is done the right way. New Bedford has an ordinance that is filed within their city council, which I know Council Vice President and I, as well as other councilors, have had discussions about implementing this over the last couple of months, is that anybody who wants a letter of non-opposition in New Bedford needs to go before a board. It's forwarded then to the planning board. The planning board then refers it over to their city council, and it's adopted at that point. I had numerous conversations with the city council president in New Bedford, Linda Morad, who said it works. Nobody's investigating New Bedford about marijuana kickbacks or anything along those lines. I think Fall River should have the opportunity to have done this the right way before. We didn't. New Bedford did it the right way, and if we were in the position where we were looking backwards, we should have adopted the same verbiage and the same language as the city of New Bedford did with their ordinance, and have the proper transparency and the proper openness to make sure that what has alleged happened doesn't happen and shouldn't happen.
Mr. Camara.
Well, I do think that we need to take a look at the process. The state determined the process, and in Fall River, having the chief executive as the final, if you will, decision maker on providing letters of non-opposition, we have the system that we currently have. But I do think that in the interest of transparency and in the interest of opening up the process so that the public is aware of the applicants, that it should be handled, and I believe by the council. The way we handle basically auto body shops, auto repair shops, even curb removals, we seek whether there's any proponents or opponents. We get a police chief report on the applicant, so that would be appropriate too in this case. One of the things that a letter of non-opposition should include is the ability of a business owner to finance the project. So all of those things, I think, could be taken into account with some kind of a review board. Ultimately, it should emphasize that it is the Cannabis Control Commission that makes the decision, so they need to pursue all of these issues as well. But I think the local government should have a screening process that opens the door to applicants and then allows the state to take over in making the final decision.
Thank you. Mr. Cole.
Sure. Yeah, so I have, I guess, a slightly different view on this. I see it from the side of a banker, and I see that we have an industry that's been legalized, and it's growing. And ultimately, you know, we do want to have the appropriate controls. We do want to be able to avoid citing issues, and we want to, and I agree that we need to have a broader approval process essentially in place and make sure that it really does fit where it's going. However, with that said, I think we need to take the politics out of the process. I think that's where you ultimately had, you know, that caused some bad faith acting. And I think what we want is sort of like technocrats in there, just making sure that the applicant complies with all of the requirements for the program. It should be a matter of checking boxes. It should be predictable from the standpoint of the investor. And this, a lot of money goes into these businesses, and obviously it hasn't been predictable, right? Allegedly. So, we need to make sure that we are making it more predictable. I'm okay with capping the number. We certainly have way more letters of non-opposition than we do facilities, and that will be the case for a long time.
Thank you. Mr. Dias.
I just want to say first, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. That being said, marijuana is a cash business only. And I think that's the first issue. It's open to corruption if there's certain individuals in there who don't have the city's best intentions at heart. I think I fully support Carol Fowler's bill. What we first need to do is work with our state and federal officials to make marijuana more than just a cash business, and I think that's the first way we need to go. The second thing, non-opposition letters should not be handed out by just one individual. We need to work as a team in a collaborative effort. So I believe the city council should form a review board of with individuals of expertise to give us recommendations when it comes to these non-opposition letters. So and if this bill passes, then the city council, along with the mayor, can work together and decide what non-opposition letters, what dispensaries are best for the city, and we can go on from there.
Thank you. Pam Martin from FRG TV will ask our next question, and it will be first answered by Christopher Peckham.
Thanks, Keith. Many cities recognize that historic preservation is much more than just saving old places. It's also an excellent business incubator, a job generator, and an economic engine. Members of the Preservation Society of Fall River point to our sister city in New Bedford as an example of a success story. Do you have a vision for historic Fall River? And what have you done so far to promote historic preservation here?
I happen to be a history guy. I have passion for history and city history in particular. I often like to tell the story of how Fall Riverites got their accent, dating back to the textile days. I took notice to Lizzie Borden's elementary school that's unfortunately going to be taken down. And I put a post on Facebook about it and how the deal was originally set and how it seems that it didn't come to fruition the way that it was planned. I did voice my opinion. I would have liked to have seen that building rehabbed. It's a historical site within the city. I think we could have done more with it, being the purpose that it had served 100 years ago, and Lizzie Borden's house being right down the street. I think they could have went hand in hand with each other, and we talk about tourism a lot within the city. The historical value of Fall River could be, it could set a precedent to save these buildings and advance tourism. Again, that building's literally a stone's throw from Lizzie Borden's house. We could have somehow worked something out to save that building. It's actually heartbreaking to see that it's going to come down.
Thank you. Ms. Pereira.
Well, I will tell you my feelings on the history of Fall River. When I look at the fact that we have Olmsted parks within the city, and we have cemeteries within the city that are also, Olmsted developments. When I look at the Oak Grove Cemetery being demolished 2 years ago, was it? 3 years already? Where all of the flower pots and vases that were purchased at the time of that person's death were purchased with the gravestone. And then people came and tore down the urns on the side, the flower boxes in the front, bronze statues that were placed from a person's war service were taken away. Honestly, I think that a person should have been fired because they destroyed the history of that cemetery. To date, they have still not replaced that. And if I'm lucky enough to get elected again, that's another thing that I would work on. And I think you have to have the Preservation Society and the Historical Society working together and give them the value that they have. They're not given the value. We just opened up, or they just are doing a groundbreaking in a methadone clinic down in the North End. They didn't even contact the Historical Society. You need 6 months' notice to knock down the chimney that's there. Nobody cares. So you can't say you care about historical preservation and then not. So I think that that's a very good question, Pam, because our history is important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ponte?
So we don't talk enough about the value of historic preservation in Fall River, but what we do talk a lot about is the buildings in Fall River that have historic components to it that everybody wants to knock down, like our former police station that has been a political turmoil fight for about 15, 20 years. We don't talk about the utilization of our downtown in Fall River, which I strongly believe and will be advocating over the next 2 years to take from Columbia Square on the top of Columbia Street, working all the way down to Sullivan Drive near Government Center, make that a one-way, improve our the width of our sidewalks to allow for downtown revitalization, leverage the CDA money that we have in the city of Fall River for the facade program that has been used but needs to be, we need to do a better job of that. But one of the things I got to say I'm happy that we've been able to accomplish as a community is the TIFs that we've been able to give to some of the larger facilities like Commonwealth Landing, for instance, which has turned into an economic engine with the restaurants that are there, with additional businesses go in there, with market rate housing. We've done a great job in Fall River converting a lot of the old mills, specifically the one on Alden Street, to market rate housing. Some of them have also been to senior citizens, to 55-plus communities that have been restored. So we've done a good job in Fall River promoting historic preservation. I haven't been an advocate for taking some of the buildings like CD Rec or the police station and let's knock it down and make it a parking lot. If that's the option, fine, but we've done a good job in Fall River over the last couple of years, specifically the last 4 to 10 years, of holding on to historic preservation for sure.
Thank you. Mr. Camara?
Pam, thanks for that question. I am passionate about historic preservation. As a young college student, I returned to Fall River when the Durfee Theater was scheduled for demolition, and with the good help of the Holy Union nuns up at Sacred Hearts Academy, we created petitions and distributed them throughout the community to try to stop the demolition of that Durfee Theater. We also sponsored a preservation meeting and expanded the definition of preservation to include not only historic structures and the historic theaters, there was both the Durfee and the Academy at that time, but also our parks, playgrounds, historic monuments, and our green space, protecting all of that. We have 3 Olmsted parks, we have Olmsted designed greens, and again, as someone who did my graduate work in New York City, I understand and see economic development as the benefit of historic preservation. When I was finally able, again, in the late 70s to buy a house, I bought an historic property on Purchase Street, in fact, and was fortunate enough to buy other properties, and I've put meticulous effort in properly preserving these properties in this historic neighborhood. So absolutely, preservation is good economic development practice.
Thank you. Mr. Cole?
Yeah, so I agree with Steve. I think we need to celebrate our historic preservation efforts and really find ways to broaden them going forward. So we all know that New Bedford is a bit of a success story. They have a different urban fabric than Fall River does. We're more linear and they're sort of more woven. You know, but we have seen the impact that preserving historic preservation has had for New Bedford. You know, I'd like to see some new ideas. We know that having these properties, it brings character, it brings value. You know, we've talked about the parks. How about St. Anne's? We haven't talked about St. Anne's and the potential, you know, loss of that, which is just mind-boggling. We can't let that happen. So we really do have to put attention into historic preservation right now. I would like to see, you know, with the development of the waterfront, you know, tie that right up into the historic Highlands with app-based touring. You know, I mean, it'll walk you through, oh, right now you're in front of this house and here's the story, you know, and really encourage people to find adventures in Fall River. And part of the way that you're going to find adventures in Fall River is through our history. It is pretty exciting, you know, we do have axe murderers. So, you know, it's already a draw, and we really need to strengthen it. And there are new and interesting ways to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Dias?
No, speaking of the waterfront, we have Battleship Cove, which is like the largest collection of historic battleships around. I believe we need to work more with our economic development director and various business individuals to promote that more, because that is like probably the biggest, like, something, big part of history of Fall River that's not promoted enough, which should be promoted a lot more. And I believe it's underused, underutilized, which is a shame. And speaking of preservation, I actually want to talk about also environmental preservation. I believe there's a lot of deforestation, too much deforestation happening within Fall River, especially in the north end with all the new housing coming in and whatnot. We need to make sure that also animals who are now going out in the middle of Highland Avenue are being taken care of. We need to make sure that not just all our individuals, but all our species and our wildlife are taken care of as well.
Thank you. Ms. Liberty LeBeau.
Thank you. So, as many people know, I didn't grow up in Fall River, but I grew up in a little town called Sandwich, Massachusetts, which is all about historic preservation. As a child, it wasn't very fun or interesting to live there, but as an adult, I have a huge appreciation for preserving our historic buildings. As far as our city buildings go, I just put in a resolution just last night's meeting with the urging and the input from the Historic and Preservation Societies to have our own ordinances looked at before any of our own city-owned buildings are demolished, whether it's for sale and there's a reverter clause in there, or what we can do or how we go about choosing who's going to buy these buildings. And as far as the city itself goes, there's so many things going on in the city that people don't even know about. We have tour buses that are going to the Lizzie Borden House. We have tour buses going to our historic museum. If you happen to see that there's a tour of the Ice House or the Spencer Borden Mansion, it fills up very quickly. Our cemeteries, as Councilor Pereira was saying, is very unfortunate what happened in Oak Grove Cemetery. I feel that a lot of times our own laws are ignored, so hopefully or our historic laws are ignored, by strengthening our ordinances, we'll be able to stop that from happening.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Well, I support any efforts to promote our history, our rich history. Just recently, about maybe a few months ago, there was an acquisition of a home that was part of the Underground Railroad, for example. To me, I find a lot of that interesting. I find that other people who ask me about this area, they don't necessarily always say Fall River, but they ask about this area, the colonial times. My time in the military, I tell people I was from Fall River, they don't know what that is. They know Emerald Degassi, or they might know a Chris Herron story or something like that. But they do know Fall River to some degree, and it's based a lot on a lot of historical factors. However, it comes down to funding. It comes down to the fact that this is a struggling city when it comes to just funding fixing roads and fixing, schools and things like that. So when we talk about the historical process and preserving historical property, we need investors out there that want to put the time and effort into that. So as a city council, we have to go out there. We have to reach out to people who want to invest in the history of Fall River and preserving it. It all comes down to resources. You name the topic that we talk about, it's always going to come down to who wants to invest in Fall River. And again, I go back to the environment. If we take care of our city, it's a city that people will want to invest in.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Alan Zarek from WSAR, and it will be answered first by Tim Cole.
With the Correa administration coming to an end in a matter of weeks, are there policies or initiatives from that administration that should continue into the next administration and a new city council?
Good question. It's an interesting dichotomy that we have in this case. We hear on the one hand that we've had a national corruption scandal, but on the other hand, we have a lot of people saying that, well, but the work was good. And, I think there will be, I'm sure some of the work was good, because it wasn't just done by Jazel, it was done by the employees of City Hall and, Fall River. And, they're going to still be there. So I believe that you don't just give up on your plans because you've changed leadership. I mean, you might reevaluate, but you're not going to give up. And you need to make sure that you're building upon the accomplishments that you've had in the past. Now, there's been a lot of talk about streetscapes versus, you know, a broader transportation investment program. And, you know, I think that probably is wise. I mean, we all know that there are areas, whole areas of the city that, you know, it's tough to find a street to drive on that isn't going to potentially damage your vehicle. But, you know, the Streetscapes program showed that if you concentrate money into a certain area, it can make a dramatic impact. But I think right now what you're hearing from the voters of the city is we'd rather see that investment spread across the entire city so that everybody can benefit from it.
Thank you. Mr. Dias.
I believe the Jason Correa administration did well when it came to like police, fire, and some financial practices were great for the city. There's a lot of things I disagreed with this administration, and when it comes to streetscapes, I personally believe it is time that we end Jason Correa's streetscapes and allocate the funding to a general street and sidewalk repair. And when we talk about moving on, there's one issue I want to bring up with that. I think it's time for a transition. Like, for example, we still have the mayor's face on the city website. I believe it's time to remove him so there's no more shame and embarrassment for our community. But that being said, we should continue some of the good practices going on and eliminate the bad, which there were equally both, I would say.
Thank you. Ms. Liberty LeBeau.
Thank you. So what I would like to see ended and I believe it will be ended, and I feel it already walking around Government Center and talking with our city employees, which we are fortunate that we have very good, very hardworking city employees, is any type of ruling by threats and intimidation. That it's already a different feel. Just for myself walking around Government Center, even today, it was comfortable being there, and we haven't had that in a while. As far as initiatives, again, at last night's meeting, we had the streetscapes. I have a resolution in to rescind the funding for the streetscapes that have not gone out to bond yet, because unfortunately what we've seen is the ones that have been completed are either over budget and being litigated, or they are not a great product. And we're having issue with a vendor that needs to be paid versus the quality of the work that was done. So when you have two projects that are done, without great success, it's hard to keep going and hope that the next one will be better. I think everyone needs to take a giant step backwards. We're going into winter anyway. Really see what kind of state funding we can get, and if we can get it, and take our time. If we are going to continue, we need to do the projects right. We want to look at the streetscapes and notice that something's been done and have a wow factor instead of litigation.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Streetscapes is obviously one of the more unpopular policies that Jason Correa implemented. I never supported it from the get-go because of how it was funded. I didn't think that we had a real repair plan in place when we were putting this out there. And bonding, not really a big fan of bonding for something that can get damaged so quickly as a sidewalk or a road. So I was not happy with how that whole process went down. And that's coming from someone who has supported some policies. And one of the policies that I was looking forward to seeing before the controversy came was investment in solar and wind energy, which I'm hoping whoever is the new mayor coming down the line, that they are looking at alternative forms of energy in the future. And also just in general, looking at outside sources of income for the city outside of the tax base. It's something that will help us long term if we're able to find revenue outside of the tax base.
Thank you. Mr. Peckham.
One thing that I took from the Carrera administration as a positive would be public safety, which I happen to work in and have for many years now, with a great appreciation to Mr. Dion for obtaining the fire trucks for the Fall River Fire Department. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done, okay? I've heard a lot of false narratives over the past few months that the police department's double in size. Negative, not true. To my last, from what I was told last, we have 168 patrolmen, and the rest are administrative staff, okay? We run 10 cars 5 days a week in the city of Fall River, which is completely ridiculous. Some of our police officers, which I'm being told now the radios are coming in, our police officers and firefighters have had radios that haven't worked in the north end of Fall River. I left it 11 years ago. They didn't work then, and they didn't work during the Fall Winds fire this past January. That's an issue. That's something that needs to be addressed. I hope the incoming administration looks at that and addresses it, okay, or continues to address it. The other thing being, I'm being told that we're buying a ton of new cars for the police department. Well, as of 2 months ago, car 6 was offline. They were using car 22, car 5 was using car 15. We run no sector 11 or sector 6, which are two of the busier sectors of the city. Outside of the fire department getting new trucks and the firefighters living in buildings that are inhabitable,
Thank you.
We need more help with public safety.
Thank you. Ms. Pereira.
Thank you. Alan, the question was, what initiatives from this administration, from the career administration, would we move forward? That was the question, right? The only thing that I would move forward would be public safety, the amount of money that Mr. Dion's office actually came up with the money, Mr. Beckham's right, for the fire trucks. And I think that we need to continue to do that through the police department, because I think we fell short on the police department. They need new vehicles. I had talked about Shot Spotter. The mayor had gotten rid of that, but then all of a sudden, we got it back. The police need as many tools as they can get to combat the crime that we have in the city. I'm a big advocate for a 2-man police car, because when you get to a scene of a crime, I don't care if it's a domestic in a house, you wait until you get back up before you enter that home. That's crazy. There should be 2-man police cars in Fall River. I would push for that. Anything else that they've done? I never voted for streetscapes. I knew it was going to be an abysmal failure, and it's turned out to be. So I never voted for that. But everything else that was done, that's it. Stop. This should be a new beginning for an administration to be honest, full of integrity, transparent to the people, and spend the taxpayers' money wisely. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ponte.
Thank you. So what I think the career administration did well was leveraging our bond dollars. I know that there were some comments made recently and just a little while ago about not wanting to bond. Well, let me tell you that if you don't bond, we don't have a Durfee High School that is being built on Ellsbury Street. If we don't bond, we aren't doing infrastructure repairs, because the Chapter 90 money that the city of Fall River receives for road repair is $2 million a year. If we don't bond, we're pretty much not repairing all of our schools that we have brand new windows going in some of the schools like Tansy. So what the career administration has done well is they've kept us under our $10 million debt for bonding. They've leveraged that. Unfortunately, we did have to go to a debt exclusion to build a new Durfee High School, but it was leveraging our bond dollars, which is what they did. And I have to echo a lot of the comments that were made here today. The career administration did a good job leveraging their CDA dollars for our fire trucks, which did need dire repair of need, but it is our priority. It needs to be our joint priority going forward. That if we want to preserve these fire trucks that we all happen to speak so highly of, we need money in our budget, and we need to advocate as city councilors to make sure money is in our budget to preserve those fire engines and those fire trucks, as we have a very challenging city, as we are a city of hills, and if you speak to our police chief, it is a challenge for him.
Thank you. Mr. Camara.
Well, there's much to be looked at that's happened with this council and this mayor over the past several years. A few of those items, when the previous mayor, prior to Mayor Correa, was in office, he declared that Fall River was close to being in receivership. And we went from being close to being in receivership to now having almost a $10 million surplus rainy day fund. So I hope that any future administration will continue to grow that fund so that Fall River can be prepared for any difficulties, whether they be 9C cuts or some other kind of financial situation that requires a resource to have. Also, this administration was responsible for the elimination of very unpopular fees, both the trash fee and the purple bag fee. Property owners and rent payers need relief, and there was some relief provided because of those two eliminations. There also have been significant improvements in our parks. I know that as a long-term counselor, I would always go to mayors and say, we've got to repair the sidewalks in our parks. We've got to make our parks more enjoyable for kids. During this period of time, this council and this mayor have put great investments in our parks to make them better places for children and for families. And there are many other things that have happened that have been good.
Thank you. Donna Mata has our next question from FRC Media, and it will be answered first by Trot Lee.
With all this talk about historic preservation and what the CREA administration has done correctly, is it time to promote the city in terms of tourism? And if so, is the way to do it through a tourism director, because a director wouldn't have a whole lot of resources to work with? So is it time, first of all, to promote Fall River and tourism, and how would you propose to do that?
So a director this is not a new topic. We've talked about a tourism director pretty much every single forum that I've been in. I don't support a director position at the moment right now. I think that, well, first of all, we need to know what the mayor's position is on it when that comes down the line anyway. But from my perspective, I think that we do have a subcommittee for tourism. It needs to be more active, in my opinion. I think the groundwork should start there from a city council perspective, and then see what comes down the line from the executive side, and go from there. But we don't have. I still don't believe that we have resources in place just to dedicate this one position when we don't have an actual tourism plan in place. And most of the things that we have right now, we need more funding to make attractive for tourism. The waterfront is talked about a lot. The Quequechan River, I mean, there was a lot of work done to shut that down. I think if we ever had the funding to open that up and make that a part of our economic tourism process, I think that would be great. But we have a lot of things that we need to clear up financially before we just start giving somebody that kind of money. I just don't see that resulting in something positive.
Thank you. Mr. Peckham.
As far as tourism, I toyed with the idea back and forth on how to go about that. I would like to see, if we are going to have a tourism director, that it would fall in line with economic development and maybe make it a one-person dual job. It saves a salary, okay? With that being said, I would like to see, the waterfront is mentioned quite often. Another place where people from outside the city come is the rail trail, and I've brought light to that recently, and the debacle that's turned into. If you want to look at my Facebook page and see the pictures, it needs some help. It's a beautiful, beautiful section of the city that if we don't start the cleanup soon, it's going to go by the wayside, and we're going to end up losing it. As far as the waterfront, I see that I would like to see the art district built up more and try to bring in more businesses that pertain to the arts. To build on the waterfront itself, you got the State Pier there, the Battleship Cove, we have Point Gloria. A lot of that's state-owned, and the State Pier itself is actually federally governed. You can't work there without a TWIC card. So it's tough to put actual businesses on the waterfront itself now because there's very little land, but to bring businesses into that area, we have the Narrows. That would be phenomenal to build our arts district. And New Bedford kind of did something similar with their downtown. They made it an artsy destination, and they do well.
Thank you. Ms. Pereira.
I could look at a couple of things. As far as the tourism director, I think a tourism director would be advantageous to the city. When Bob Carrere was mayor, he had the trolley cars that went around. I think that you could get any auto body shop in the city to redo our trolley cars and go around the city. Put the name of the company that redid them, but you would go and see the Highlands, you would see the older homes, you would see the row houses on Broadway. There's so many things. Watuppa Pond, biggest bass fishing pond. You know how many tournaments you could have there? People pay big bucks to come in and participate in that. You have the Brighton Street Bridge. Let's get that thing painted. Let's get that thing open. There's parking on the side that's available. Put some vendors there. Let's look at the gates of the city. If it's the gates of the city, why don't we fence that in? You could have shows. You have Foxwood and Mohegan and all those places, people come, they perform there. You might get them cheap to come and perform here one night. Have some activities there. There are things to do, but you can't do it alone. It needs to be a combined effort. And I think that Sandy Dennis has done a tremendous job in all that she has done to try to bring things into Fall River. I think somebody like her is just perfect for the job if she would want it. And it's not major money, but look at the investment that you're going to get back. And use these food vendors, these trucks, they're going all over the place. Come on, get people motivated, get people excited about being here. Thank you, Keith.
Mr. Ponte.
So I don't want to lose track of the fact that we do have a director, some sort of economic development that does report to the redevelopment authority at no cost to the taxpayers in the sense of a salary. That is currently happening. That is currently in full force, limited in what their scope can do because it's based on the redevelopment authority properties, what they can and can't do with it. But let's not lose track of the fact that there is a main point of contact for economic development. And what I think we need to start getting away from is there doesn't need to be one main person who does economic development. Let's speak about the strength of other departments. Let's not no longer be a conversation about the city of Fall River versus Ken Fiola and the Office of Economic Development. Let's shy away from that and let's bring every group in to have an economic development force that is like no other community. Let's bring CAN in, let's bring FROED in, let's bring a number of different economic engines that will just move Fall River forward as being one of the strongest economic foundations in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We've done a good job of doing and offering small business loans and enterprising for job creation and job retention over the last 5 or 10 years. And I think what we need to continue to do is have a point of contact to link the businesses and the local career centers for hiring Fall River residents, which my colleague to my right here, Linda Pereira, has always advocated for as well.
Thank you. Mr. Camara.
Fall River has all of the ingredients to become New England's next great city, from our waterfront to our neighborhoods to our historic districts. So having a director, but I don't think it should be exclusively a director of tourism. It should be a director of tourism, arts, and culture, because arts and culture are truly the driving force, the economic force in so many communities in enhancing their economic development. We need only look at Providence and New Bedford as 2 examples that have used the arts to promote their tourism and to promote the beauty of their particular communities. I was formerly a director under the Chamber of Commerce of the, some may remember, the tourism center that we had on I-195. So I got to meet a lot of people that were traveling to Cape Cod or to Newport coming over the Massachusetts line. And when they heard of what existed in Fall River from me and the team that worked in that particular trailer, it was kind of a nasty place, but we did the best we could with the resources we had. We were able to channel a lot of people into Fall River, and they were impressed with what we had. So let's not underestimate our greatness. We have the potential to be New England's next great city. Let's make it happen.
Thank you. Mr. Cole.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a great question. I think that ultimately it's an example of how you can invest in the community, how investment can drive more revenue and growth in the future. And tourism is something, like Steve says, that's kind of ripe for picking in Fall River. But I would say this to the director position. I think we've got the wrong geography. I think we need a director of tourism for the South Coast. And I think that ultimately the South Coast is where you might be able to get people to come and stay for a week. You know, spend your day in Fall River, spend your day, you know, in New Bedford, spend your day in Newport, maybe Providence, right? But, you know, we do have all of the ingredients in place to take advantage of, and we just have to get the temperature right, you know, to bake the right product. And I think that leads, what you do, you know, this is all about regionalism. You know, I got my master's degree in city and regional planning, and I worked with economic development directors in the past, starting with a strong tourism function for the region is the most important thing. Fundamentally, I think what you want to see out of Fall River is campaigns. You want to see successful campaigns. I don't really, I don't care who puts them together, as long as you have successful campaigns for, you know, individual excursions that draw people into the city once they've been brought to the South Coast.
Thank you. Mr. Dias.
To directly answer your question, Donna, if the mayor sent down a proposal to fund a tourism director, I would support that. I believe Fall River has many we already have the tools here already. We have great small and large businesses already that can be promoted. I believe economic development and tourism are two different things. You have the economic development, and the tourism is basically the advertisement for that economic development. We have great businesses in the community, but there are still things we have to work on in order to have a very successful tourism campaign. We need to improve our roadways, and I've spoke to that before. We need to make sure we don't have any potholes, that individuals aren't filing claim against the city, and we need to improve our parks. I disagree with Councilor Camara that all our parks are in great condition. For example, if you want to go down to Kennedy Park, you can see all the mangled stairways there. We need to improve our parks, and we need to improve our housing. I've received so many complaints around the community of nuisance properties, absentee properties, slumlord properties, drug trafficking in apartments, and we need to start off by strengthening and enforcing our property laws. I believe if we have that all together, we'll have a successful tourism campaign.
Thank you. Ms. Liberty LeBeau.
Thank you. I am the current chair on the Committee on Tourism and Economic Development, and the administration did send down two proposals, actually. They were giving the council options on what we would like to see. And what we asked them to do was to tell us what the administration wanted. The administration proposes and the council approves or disposes. And we also asked that the position not be a political hire, a gift of a job for somebody. And they did not bring it back down. I actually had a conversation with the city administrator just earlier today asking why it hasn't come back down, and she said that she could not promise the hiring of that position. So it is currently tabled in committee, but I do agree with it. I just made a quick list while the others were talking of a Historic Society, Battleship Cove, the Gates of the City, which is getting hopefully new electricity to have even bigger events. We have the boardwalk, the Narrows, Route 79 is coming down. As Ms. Pereira was saying about the trolleys, the Creative Arts Network with the Dennises have worked to get, they already have funding for new trolleys, fully handicapped accessible trolleys, with help from the Disability Commission. I'm working with the state delegation on a hat shell. All of these different things have events. There are events happening everywhere, but we don't have anybody putting it all together and really promoting it. And I think we saw that with the Fabric Arts Festival. It was a great festival, and we should have had thousands of people in the city for that. But what we don't have is the promotion, and we need it.
Thank you. I think we're going to have time for one more round of questioning, then we'll do our closing statement. So we'll go back to Michael Sylvia from the Fall River Reporter, who will ask a question first to Linda Pereira.
Year after year, Fall River falls on the list of most dangerous cities in Massachusetts. Youth unemployment is a major contributor to the crime in the city. As minimum wage continues to rise to $15 by 2023, our youth continue to be pushed out of the job market. Share some ideas that will reduce youth unemployment, thus reduce crime in the city of Fall River.
I don't think that it's just youth unemployment that creates that. I have a granddaughter who's 16, and we have been all over for her to apply for a job, because obviously 16, she wants to get a car, et cetera. But I don't think it's just the unemployment. I think it's the lack of what youth can do. And sometimes you need to start out with volunteering so that you have something to put on a paper, something to put on a resume. You've got to get the youth involved, and that's one of the big things that I feel needs to happen. You need to have things like at Kennedy Park. You need to have talks. People will come down and give a talk on different issues. Think about having a Fall Rivers Got Talent. Think of how much youth is going to come out. I think we look at the youth of our city and we don't look at the positive youth that we have. The youth that are working, that are doing good, that are involved in extracurricular activities at schools. Why don't we have street theater again? Why don't we do that? If we want to promote culture and the arts, and we want to get our youth involved, that's where you start. So I don't think it's so much about unemployment of youth. I think it's about just getting youth to feel that they're wanted, they're loved, they're part of this community as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ponte.
I think we need to do a better job as a community leveraging the programs that we have. We have BCTC, who I recently, just last night, actually appointed Beth Viveris as I'm acting mayor to the role of interim director of BCTC, somebody who's been there for 39 years, who has done a tremendous amount of work with our youth. Let's talk about somebody like Christian McClowski, who does a tremendous amount of work with our youth. Last night, the City Council, I worked with my colleagues on the City Council, who gave Peter McCarthy from the Boys and Girls Club a citation of over 25 years of service to the greater Fall River community. But one thing that I think would make a big difference is start talking on all of our high schools, Atlantis Charter School, Diamond, Durfee, Conley, is have the school to career program and start speaking about it more. Work, you leave school at 11 o'clock, you start your career, go to work, and report back to school. Durfee High School did that under Tom Pavo for many, many years, and it was a booming success at Durfee High School. As you were an upperclassman, your junior and senior year, if you were done your credits and you were qualified enough, you were able to go away to your job. At that time, I was at Fall River Municipal Credit Union, and I left Durfee at noontime, and I worked until 4, and I reported back to, my supervisor at Durfee in terms of how that helped me. And I got to say that if we leverage that more, speak more about it, and promote it more within our schools and all of our high schools, it'll make a big difference going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Camara.
Well, I reject the premise that Fall River is a dangerous city. I think Fall River is a safe city overall. There are problems, as exist in every urban community, but I feel comfortable, and I think most people feel comfortable in their neighborhoods and in their city. The youth unemployment rate is unquestionably an important one, and that's why I don't just involve myself in local activities. I involve myself in both national policy and state policy. Youth unemployment is significantly higher, and minority youth unemployment is even higher than just the general youth unemployment. But we need a national policy, and we need state policies that address the issue of youth unemployment. So I encourage all of you who are watching and listening to involve yourselves in this upcoming presidential election to make sure that we have presidential national leadership that address the issues of unemployment and opportunities for youth. We too many times like to think that we live in the vacuum of Fall River. We live very well connected to the entire planet and particularly to our country. And unless there's a national policy that addresses the question of the needs of youth and particularly minority youth, and Fall River is largely becoming a community of minority population, we will continue to fail to address the needs of youth in our community.
Thank you. Mr. Cole?
Yeah, so I guess I would also reject the premise, but a different premise. I do believe that Fall River has its dangers. It plays itself out in the statistics, and we can't deny it. We have to address it. We can't run away from these problems. I don't think that youth unemployment is the reason. I think that drug use is the reason. I think that, gang activity is the reason. I've been around to the neighborhood associations, and, you get the rundown of the crimes in the community over the last month, and yeah, there were a couple fights at Durfee, but for the most part, it had nothing to do with the kids. At the same time, I would like to sort of echo what Linda had to say, that let's look at it as something not about unemployment, but maybe uninvolvement. What we really want to do is raise the rate of involvement for kids, not necessarily stick them all into jobs. And Linda was pointing out, some paths forward to do that. I really have a vision. It's a long-term vision, and I wish I had more time to talk about it. But where Fall River is a classroom for the students in our community, and the learning takes place in the community. And by doing that, you're not only teaching them, how things get done, but why, by who. And they're building the social capital with the people in the community, knowing who actually does it and who they should call if they need that issue to be solved.
Thank you. Mr. Dias.
I would say to capitalize on youth involvement in the city. First, I would say I believe teachers need to be. There's a lot of kids at home who don't have their parents always there for them. Either they have multiple jobs or they're away, and I've, like, obviously I'm 19 years old. I understand the situation they're going through. With that being said, I believe we need to train our teachers to be more role models. I believe people my age, friends my age, always, who are doing well, always talk about, they always have a great role model teacher in their life, and that's really, and they really set the cornerstone for them to have a successful future, whatever they want to do. So I believe we need to teach, we need to educate our teachers to be more role models and to have more one-on-one involvement with kids in the community. And I think especially the youth crime rate will start to drop, I believe.
Thank you. Ms. Liberty LeBeau.
Thank you. I also am not in agreement with the most dangerous city piece. We live in an urban environment. We live in a city. We're going to have traffic. We're going to have noise. We're going to have people that don't get along. We have a lot of people in small confined spaces, 3 families, 4 families, 6 families. And when they're comparing the towns for these, they're not always comparing the same statistics. Sometimes the towns don't even submit their statistics. So it's not the greatest comparison when you see those rankings. And I just had this conversation with my daughter the other night explaining that not everybody weighs in or gives the same statistics. And as far as youth unemployment, I apologize, I cannot remember which of the gentlemen to my right said it, but it is about getting the youth involved in early and having parent involvement and support at home. We don't want kids to slip through the cracks. We do have the Boys and Girls Club, we have CD Recreation, we have after-school programs at the schools, there's theater, sports, dance, there's anything that a child might want to get involved with. At the Boys and Girls Club, they have absolutely everything under the sun imaginable, and it is such a safe space. That was where my son was earlier this evening while I was here. He's in 4th grade. He absolutely loves it. But I think it starts at home. We need to get our parents involved. We need to get our kids involved in whatever they're interested in, and then we need to support them in that.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
I'll be the only one up here to say that there are dangerous parts of Fall River, that we do have to have concern for gang violence in Fall River and many other crime problems in Fall River. And your question connects poverty to violence, and I feel as though there are job opportunities that need to expand for children as well, or not children, but the youth in Fall River as well, but also it starts in the classroom. Just recently, I just recently had a conversation with a school committee member who told me that they're making efforts to have more civic education in the classroom. And I think that's going to hopefully point children towards the direction of economics, of learning what taxes are, of learning, what bills really are, being responsible, and those kind of elements I think have not been ingrained as much as they can be in the youth of our city, and obviously in other communities as well. It would be of benefit to have, we've seen it in a national scale, that tax incentives to businesses can promote job growth. So maybe as what we can do as a city is provide incentives to businesses that will hire the youth, that'll hire and put them on the payroll so that they can have some funds as well.
Thank you. Mr. Peckham.
All right, without sugarcoating it, I'm going to go on a limb and say that Fall River is up there as one of the more dangerous cities in Massachusetts, okay? I do it for a living. If anybody wants to contest that, you can walk around the prison with me. The majority of those people are, it's an opiate addiction or a drug addiction. There's a relation there, correlation, okay? How I feel we could combat that? Actually, let me reverse. We have 3 motorcycle gangs now in the city and 2 gangs, one being the Asian Boys and the other one being a gang that runs between Fall River and New Bedford, okay? That handles a lot of the drug trade in the city. That's a major issue, and that's why our police department needs to be revamped and We need to add people to it. That's how we're going to combat that issue. Early intervention in schools, to talk about addiction with the children, to talk about gang violence, okay? We used to have a really good gang program at Durfee High School when I was there. I graduated back in '01. I don't know if it still exists. I would like to look into that. That's where we need to start, is with the children, and teach them where gang violence leads you, where opiate addiction in general leads you. And I would also like to see something like the CETA program or CD Rec, which is still in existence, maybe expanded, where we can get kids working early so they learn the benefit of having a job.
Thank you. Now it's time for our closing statements for tonight, 90 seconds apiece. And the candidate which will begin our closing statements will be Colin Dias.
I just want to first thank you, Keith. I also wish to thank the Fall River Reporter, Fall River Herald News, FRC Media, WSAR, and FRC Media again. I am running because I want to help restore honest government to our community, and most importantly, restore stable government to our community. I want to take on the systematic network of under-the-table deals and decisions being made for the privileged few and not everyone. I want everyone to have a seat at the table. Because if we have a cornerstone of honest government, we can tackle all the issues that face our community. So we can pass ethics reform. We can take on the Comcast contract that plagues the city with high fees. We can create park watch groups so we can monitor the drug activity that goes on in the parks, which we all know about. I am basically running, I'm an open, honest individual who will answer any question anyone ever has, and I just want to be the first part in the right direction, and I believe it's time this generation passes the torch on to the next generation, and we can move forward as a community for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Olivia-LeBeau.
Thank you. Thank you to Fall River Community Media, FRC Media, and all the news organizations that are here tonight. I am very thankful for the support I have received over the past 2 terms as a city councilor. Thankful for my colleagues that voted for me to represent them as their city council vice president. This isn't an easy job. Some votes are not easy to take. Sometimes as a candidate or just a resident, when you're asked a question, it's easy to dance around what your answer might or might be, what vote you might or might not have taken. But when it's in front of you and you're sitting there, you have to take a vote at the end of the day. You have to take a stance, and you have to take a vote, no matter what the outcry might be. You have to be strong enough, thick-skinned enough to take votes that aren't always popular. As a female city councilor, I have been criticized about my weight, my hair, my clothes, my family members, my children. And people ask me, why do you even bother? Because at the end of the day, you can make a difference. And the good absolutely outweighs the negative. You're able to help people. You're able to fix something that might seem very small, but to them, it makes all the difference in the world, and how they feel about living here, and how they're happy, and it's changed their day. So I appreciate the support over the last 2 terms, and I hope that it continues on in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Thank you to everyone for this opportunity. I always appreciate all of you coming here, and at the same time, I wish there was more. I wish that we had more of these kind of opportunities when candidates are coming out here. My name's Trot Lee, and I'm running for city council. I am a born and raised citizen of Fall River, and if you look at my history, any part of my history, you'll see that it's nothing but service to the community. Even as a little child, even as a kid, just volunteering in my church, and then being a military member later on after I graduated high school, getting involved in the community, putting time at the Veterans Center. Just no matter where you go in my history, I'm always looking out for the community. I'm always trying to do my best. And if you vote for me as a city councilor, all you're going to get is my best. You're going to get that same effort every single time, regardless of what's going on around me, whatever's going on around me, all the distractions that can come from being an elected official. I'm not going to let that bother me. I'm not going to let any of that bother me in service to the city. I've even talked to my job. I have a job that I love to death. It's part of the reason why I've never run for any bigger office than city council. And they've talked to me about also giving me the time to put into the city. So put that in your thoughts on November 5th, and give me the opportunity to serve you as a city councilor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peckham.
I want to also thank everybody for their time tonight. Chris Peckham, again, born and raised in the city, grew up in Watuppa Heights, moved to the Flint. I just want what's best for the city. I love this city more. It's right at the top with my family and my kids. This city means everything to me, okay? It's kind of a joke within the prison system when I'm walking around and the inmates will throw out Fall River and they'll wait to see if I turn my head. I don't hide where I come from, never have, okay? I've said it before, I've got it tattooed on my body. This is where I grew up. What I've taken away from tonight, more importantly, was listening to the other, the incumbents and the candidates on the side of me. What I want to bring to the table is, I have a strong background, public safety, addiction, okay? And after listening to the other people at the table, they also have things to offer too. All I wanted to do was bring what I was good at, right? And offer it to the city of Fall River. I was sitting through city council meetings, I was seeing bickering and all the negativity that was going on in the city, and I kept thinking to myself, how could I help? How could I best serve the city of Fall River? My whole life I've thought of myself as a public servant, and I was for public service and not self-service. I've always tried to be able to do things to help with my line of work between the Sheriff's Office, the Fall River PD, and the Department of Correction now. I've always tried to put myself in a position where I could help people. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pereira.
Well, I do stand up and speak out when I see things are wrong. One of those examples that I think is that we have no diversity on our boards and commission. If we're a diverse community, we should show it. But I also rally around and support things that are right, like the Vietnam Wall that we'll be getting here in Fall River. I think that's phenomenal. Fall River right now is going through a sad time. You look at citizens who feel distrustful towards elected leaders. But I think this is an opportunity to turn that around, reclaim and rebuild Fall River. You know I'm passionate and love our hometown. You know me. I've always tell it like it is, because that's who I am. So I would respectfully ask for your vote on Tuesday, November 5th. Along with thanking Keith and the panel, I'd like to thank all of the individuals here at this table, especially the newcomers who've never been through this process. It takes a lot to put your name on a ballot. Whether you win or you lose, you stood up to fight to try to make Fall River a better place. And for that, I applaud you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ponte.
Thank you. Tonight I want to talk about the problem that we know is dragging down our city like a giant albatross. The elephant in the room, the perception of Fall River. Some would like to dismiss it by saying it's not true. Well, we may know it, but the sad reality that in politics and in government, perception is reality. The perception began with our government. Would anyone and could anyone trust our government? The sad reality is that the perception did spread to our citizens. News stations, print media, even the Lieutenant Governor of Rhode Island implied that there's something wrong with you and I, and that because we allowed this to happen. I know that you, the honest, hardworking taxpayers of this community, do not deserve this attention. Our city, a city where many immigrants came and made their life with hard work and perseverance, is not deserving of being condemned because of the actions of few. So tonight I want you to know that I'm going to do everything within my power to bring back honest, transparent, and accountable government. 2 years ago, in the last 2 terms, you gave me the opportunity to serve as your city councilor. It's been a tremendous responsibility and something that I've enjoyed very much. On November 5th, you are going to the ballot to cast your vote. You're accepting your responsibility. Tonight, every night, and every day, for as long as I have the opportunity to serve the city, I'm going to accept my responsibility to you, to be your voice, to be your advocate, and to be your city councilor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Camara.
Again, thank you, FRC media and panelists, and particularly you, the voters, who are paying attention to this election. I've been called by some as the voice of logic and reason, and I've sometimes been criticized for standing alone. I think it might go back to my days as a son of a grocer, a pioneer grocer, independent grocer, and we stood up to the big box stores and we did well and survived. I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk. When I came back to Fall River after college, I did exactly what we tell our graduates from Durfee to do and other high schools, to come back to your community and give back to your community to make it the best community that it can be. And that's what I've dedicated my life to. So whether in public office or out of public office, I've always been a community activist first, trying to bring better government to our community. I do believe Fall River is New England's next great city. I think we have all the potential to make that happen. I not only consider and am flattered by those who consider my positions to be logical and supportive of reason, but I do it with a sense of optimism, because I do think that Fall River's best days are ahead. Respectfully, I ask for a vote for Steve Camara. No yard signs, no bumper stickers promote my campaign. It's word of mouth, people talking to people. Respectfully, I ask for your vote on November 5th.
Thank you. Mr. Cole.
So thank you to our moderator, Keith, and our media panel. Thank you to the attendees in the audience and to the folks watching at home. I want to echo another point here. I want to say thank you to all of the candidates here, the candidates that also were debating earlier tonight, because, you know, having been through this my first time and having done quite a bit, this is a tough job. Campaigning is not easy. And so everybody here has earned my respect by showing up. So a vote for Tim Cole is a vote to turn ideas into action. I want to expand the tax base, not the tax rate. I want free cancer screenings for our Fall River firefighters. I want net school spending plus every year. I want to see more police officers on duty. I want to put a homeless volunteer to work program into place. I'd like to see supportive pathways for our opioid addicts, and I want to see best practices in our boards and commissions as well. I'm running on my resume. I'm asking you to vote for me because of my proven integrity, professionalism, and vision, or because of my experience working with government on projects like the South Coast Rail, the First Step In project, homeless shelter, the Block Island offshore wind farm, for example. Please vote for me, Tim Cole, because I am a volunteer and board member in the community, or because I have worked as a banker, an economist, and a strategic planner. But mostly, I'd like you to vote for me so that I can help Fall River invest, grow, and share for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank all the candidates and our panelists for being here tonight. Special thanks to our FRC media staff, Steve Rice, Michelle Dumas, Denise Pumaguaye, and Lucy Cabral. I also want to thank Sean Elliott and his staff here at Bristol Community College for hosting tonight's forum. You can watch a replay of this forum and find out more about all the candidates running in the race by tuning into FRC Media Channel 95 or our website, frcmedianews.org. Also, would like you to join us on election night as we work with our colleagues at FRG TV to provide election coverage of the results. So for all of us here tonight, thank you. Please vote. Have a good night.